Chapter 735. Sharp Contrast Pot? She actually brought a pot? Did she really think that she was here for an outing? Wenhuo could not understand what was going on in this woman's mind. However, Yundong had already started to look for rocks to build a small stove. Wenhuo frowned. At the same time, the other guard, Dajiang, felt that it was not good to let a girl do things, so he whispered, "Young master, you'll go nearby to pick up some firewood." "Okay, go ahead." Dajiang did not walk far either. He was within sight and could come over if anything happened. After Dajiang left, Wenhuo finally could not take it anymore and walked towards Yundong. His tone was still rather gentle. "Miss Gu, it's not good to go hunting in the mountains with a pot, right? How can it not be good? It's convenient to cook." As she spoke, she took out a seasoning bottle from her backpack. Wenhuo's mouth twitched. "We went into the mountains to hunt. We're not that particular about food." "You can't say that. Although we're on the mountain and there are limited conditions in all aspects, we have to give ourselves the best treatment we can, right? It won't delay things even if we bring the pot. We can eat some vegetables and rice occasionally after we eat too much roasted meat. This time, we'll be on the mountain for a few days." When Wenhuo heard about the rice, he wondered if she had brought the rice with her. Sure enough, Yundong took out a small bag of rice. It was not much, but she could still eat a few meals with some water and porridge. Wenhuo was suddenly at a loss for words. He felt a little irritated. "You sure know how to enjoy yourself. So young Master Dai came to the mountains to suffer?" Yundong was surprised. "In that case, you'll put less rice. Coincidentally, this pot isn't very big." It was enough for her and Shao Qingyuan to eat. She was indeed as good as her word. Wenhuo almost fell back in anger. Forget it. He did not want to waste any more time. He returned to the rock he was sitting on and took 2 sips of water from the water bag. He did not want to talk to Yundong anymore. Not long after, Dajiang found a lot of dry firewood. Yundong didn't use the firewood. She found a few large pieces of dry wood, lit a fire at the bottom, and covered it with a lid. She let the small milk pot boil. Then she found 2 wild vegetables beside her. After washing them, she placed them on the oilcloth and cut them into pieces. When Shao Qingyuan and Dai returned with 2 pheasants each, Yundong had already prepared everything. There was even a fragrance coming out of the milk pot. Shao Qingyuan was a little surprised. "You're cooking porridge?" He hadn't looked carefully before and didn't notice that she had brought rice. Yundong looked at the pheasants in his hand. Yes, they were very fat and tender. She wanted to take them, but Shao Qingyuan didn't let her. "I'll handle it." Although he did not know how to cook, it was not a problem for him to deal with wild chickens and rabbits. He could light a fire and roast them to make do. Yundong did not move. Shao Qingyuan and Dajiang took the pheasants to the river to kill them. After a while, they cut open the pheasants and skewered them to roast. Wenhuo only let out a sigh of relief when he smelled the roasted chicken. He quickly sprinkled the seasoning on it. His 2 guards took out a few pancakes from their bags. They were made by the old woman from the Shao family before they went out this morning. There were a lot. The pancakes were dry and could last for 2 days. Wenhuo watched as Yundong took out 2 small wooden bowls and filled them with hot vegetable porridge. She ate with relish and he held 2 pancakes in silence. Chapter 736. He misjudged him. If he didn't compete, he wouldn't have known. But why did he feel so miserable? "Young master, this pancake will soften after being warmed up." The 2 guards had been by his side for many years, so they could more or less tell that he did not have an appetite. Wenhuo glared at the guard and stopped overing. He lowered his head and took a bite. He wanted to see how far Yundong could carry that pot. Shao Qingyuan also glanced at Wenhuo and asked Yundong in a low voice, "What's wrong? Did he bully you?" "No, I just don't like him." "Who asked him to not let me follow you into the mountains? He looks like I'm here to drag him down." Yundong sneered. "Hurry up and eat. You're not allowed to share the food with him." "Okay." Shao Qingyuan glanced at him and thought for a moment. He felt that it was too comfortable to eat in front of him. Therefore, he held the small wooden bowl and silently turned around with his back facing him. Dai Wenhuo was speechless. Beauty misled people. This guy valued his lover over his friend. He had misjudged him. Gu Yundong almost burst out laughing. She tore off a leg from the roast chicken beside her and placed it in Shao Qingyuan's bowl. More. Don't starve. Okay. Shao Qingyuan completely forgot about Dai Wenhuo. He ate the drumstick meat given by his fiancée in peace. The sound of him drinking porridge made Dai Wenhuo want to hit him. The pancake in his hand became even more tasteless. Dai Yi and Dajiang looked at each other and sighed secretly. After eating and drinking to her heart's content, Gu Yundong washed the pot and bowls and put them in her bag. It did not seem troublesome at all. Shao Qingyuan extinguished the fire until there were no more sparks. Then he called for everyone to keep moving. The group walked deeper and deeper, and the road became more and more difficult. When the sky gradually darkened, Shao Qingyuan found an empty place to stop and rest. Gu Yundong did not cook porridge this time. She took out the pancake that Shao Qingyuan had placed in the bag and roasted it. Then, she cut the remaining half of the roasted chicken into small pieces and stuffed them into the pancake. Then, she took the wild vegetables, mushrooms, and chicken bones to cook a small pot of bone soup. Yes, the chicken pancake with soup was simply delicious. It was too enjoyable. Dai Wenhuo was speechless. Was this woman specially trying to anger him? As expected, she was very good at food. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to open a food shop. He continued to nibble on the dry pancake, but Dai Yi was quick-witted. He imitated Gu Yundong and stuffed chicken into the pancake. This way, it was much more delicious, but without soup, it felt boring after 2 bites. Shao Qingyuan silently turned his head and continued to turn his back to them. After dinner, Dai Wenhuo began to set up his tent. His tent was the kind of simple tent used for marching. It was very sturdy and durable. He wanted to see what Gu Yundong would do at night. She was capable of cooking and had enjoyed it for the entire day, but the most difficult thing was to sleep at night, right? Dai Wenhuo knew that Shao Qingyuan basically spent the night on trees when he went deep into the mountains. However, the trip this time would be long, so he also prepared a tent. Still, Dai Wenhuo had seen it last night. Shao Qingyuan's tent was actually just a layer of cloth. It was barely able to block the wind. Dai Wenhuo didn't say anything at that time, but he thought that it would be fine if Shao Qingyuan stayed in his tent. But no. Thinking of how he valued his lover over his friend, Dai Wenhuo decided to forget it and let the man suffer on his own. Chapter 737. He's Liu Xiahui? Dai Wenhuo did not say anything. When the tent was set up, he looked at the two of them coldly. Gu Yundong put down her hiking bag and took out a bag. David frowned and looked over. It was actually oilcloth? Gu Yundong shook it open and asked Shao Qingyuan to help support it. Then she took out a pile of rivets and found a rock to knock on. She acted skillfully, orderly, and quickly. Not long after, a round tent that looked like it was airtight and sturdy was set up. Gu Yundong unbuttoned the tent and entered to take a look. Yes, it was too wet to sleep like this. Although there was a layer of oilcloth underneath and a pile of grass under the oilcloth, it was still a little cold. She did have a damp-proof pad, but unfortunately, it couldn't be used here. Until Shao Qingyuan opened his bag and took out a piece of leather to lay on it. Gu Yundong immediately laughed. "You're so thoughtful. It's getting late. Just go in and rest." With that, he raised his tent that could not be simpler than a layer of cloth. The corners of Gu Yundong's mouth twitched. He put away the tent. "This tent is big enough. You can sleep in here too." Dai Wenhuo, who had quietly walked over to take a look at Gu Yundong's strange tent, heard this and spat out a mouthful of water. Gu Yundong gave him a disdainful look. "Don't make a fuss. You have to do what's convenient when you're outside, understand? This was nothing convenient, right?" Gu Yundong ignored him and turned to look at Shao Qingyuan. However, she saw that he was stunned and did not move. She could tell that he was nervous when she saw him swallowing uncomfortably. Shao Qingyuan thought about it very much. He felt that he should stay in the same tent as Yundong. In the end, he still had to consider her reputation. There were not only the two of them here, but also Dai Wenhuo, a young master who had been influenced by rules and etiquette since he was young. So he still shook his head, but Gu Yundong said, I only feel safe when you live there. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep at night. Shao Qingyuan immediately nodded. Okay, I'll protect you. Forget it. What rules and etiquette? If Dai Wenhuo dared to go out and spout nonsense, he would kill him. Dai Wenhuo felt the death threat that Shao Qingyuan threw over and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. They could not be friends anymore. After leaving the mountains, it was better not to interact with each other. He did not have such friends. Shao Qingyuan put away his pile of rags and went straight into Gu Yundong's tent. However, the moment he entered, there were only the two of them left in the small space. His nose was filled with her scent, and Shao Qingyuan's body stiffened uncontrollably. Gu Yundong became nervous when she saw him buttoning up the tent. Damn it, she had overestimated herself. Now, the blood in her body began to gurgle and surge. Her hands and feet were stiff. It was Shao Qingyuan. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief and said, It's getting late. You should sleep. Gu Yundong slowly lay down. With his back facing Shao Qingyuan, his breathing became lighter. It was terrifyingly quiet in the tent. Dai Wenhuo leaned over, but she did not hear a single sound. Could it be that his brother is Liu Xiahui? What nonsense are you thinking? Dai Wenhuo went into his tent. Dajiang was on night watch today. He went straight up the tree and quietly watched the movements below. Chapter 738, Tacit Understanding. The night passed uneventfully. When Gu Yundong woke up, he saw Shao Qingyuan sleeping a meter away from him. His entire body was well behaved. His eyes were closed and his breathing was calm. It was not the first time Gu Yundong had seen him sleeping, but now that he was lying not far from her, she had a very different feeling. The first thing she saw when she woke up was him. She could be in a good mood for the entire day. Gu Yundong could not help but smile as she slowly sat up. However, no matter how gently she moved, Shao Qingyuan still opened his eyes instantly. There was a moment of confusion in his eyes, but he quickly regained his senses. You're awake. He had just woken up and his voice was a little hoarse. However, Shao Qingyuan looked at her with a burning gaze. He subconsciously reached out and pulled her into his arms. He had wanted to do so last night, but he was afraid that he could not control his impulses so late at night. Shao Qingyuan suddenly coughed lightly and immediately let go of her. Wait here for a while. I'll get water for you to wash up. With that, he turned around and left the tent, looking a little disheveled. Gu Yundong was stunned for a moment before she suddenly laughed out loud. Did he not know that it was easy to be impulsive in the morning? She stretched her back and packed her things. After tidying up, the few of them set off again. However, although they said that they were going into the mountains to hunt, in fact, everyone was distracted. Shao Qingyuan didn't care much about the prey. Before he came out, he had brought a small basket that was hanging on his waist. Along the way, he had been looking for precious and rare herbs. Dai Wenhuo said that he was here to kill big guys, so he pretended not to see any roe deer, wild boar, deer, or sheep on the way. At most, Dajiang and Dai Yi would hunt wild chickens and hares to fill their stomachs. But Gu Yundong still noticed that Dai Wenhuo seemed to be looking for something. What was he looking for? Gu Yundong did not ask and pretended not to know. On the third day, the group stood at a fork in the road. When Shao Qingyuan asked which way they were going, Dai Wenhuo asked him, Have you explored both roads? Shao Qingyuan shook his head. I've been to the left, but I've never explored the right. Dai Wenhuo said, Then take the right. He smiled. There might be something good. Shao Qingyuan had no objections. He had been to the left side before, and there were not many medicinal herbs. This time he could check the right. Perhaps he could find Bai Musi? The group walked to the right for another day. Perhaps because it had been a long time, Dai Wenhuo became a little anxious. Chapter 739. Pretend not to know. Shao Qingyuan nodded. Qin Wenjing asked me about some things in the mountains. This time, Dai Wenhuo asked me to bring him into the mountains. Perhaps there's something in the mountains we don't know. Gu Yundong gritted his teeth. Qin Wenjing is in cahoots with Dai Wenhuo. This goddamn guy promised not to drag us into his mess. As expected, he didn't do it. I guess there's no other way. Shao Qingyuan felt that no matter if it was Qin Wenjing or Dai Wenhuo, they were doing their best to not let them get involved in these matters. But there were some things that could not be avoided. Gu Yundong snorted and did not say anything. Qin Wenjing and Dai Wenhuo were both the emperor's men. What they wanted to do was naturally what the current emperor wanted to do. Gu Yundong thought that the emperor was a wise ruler and had done her favors. If she could help without implicating herself, she would help. Shao Qingyuan looked at her unhappy expression and smiled. She said that she wanted to draw a line, but with her current relationship with Qin Wenjing, how could she draw a line? She treated Qin Wenjing as a friend, so she naturally wouldn't stand by and do nothing. Since he had said so, Gu Yundong continued to pretend that she did not know Dai Wenhuo's motive. The next day, they continued walking. Shao Qingyuan was familiar with the roads in the mountains. He knew that Dai Wenhuo might be looking for something, so he deliberately avoided the traces of those large beasts. On the 5th day after they entered the mountains, Shao Qingyuan discovered traces of a bear. He led his men in the opposite direction. However, since Dai Wenhuo was looking for something, he naturally paid special attention to all kinds of traces. He also saw the footprints of the bears, but at the same time he also saw traces similar to humans entering and leaving. Delight appeared on Dai Wenhuo's face, but he did not want to implicate Shao Qingyuan, especially with Gu Yundong around. Therefore he continued to walk forward and asked Dajiang to investigate. Dajiang used the excuse of hunting rabbits to run away. Gu Yundong and Shao Qingyuan did not expose him, but they slowed down. Before noon, they stopped to eat. Gu Yundong no longer had any rice. She did not bring much. There was still some dried meat and some wild vegetable soup. Just as she was scooping a bowl of soup for each of them, a banging sound suddenly came from not far away. The few of them quickly stood up and picked up their weapons. Gu Yundong could only pour away the wild vegetable soup. He stuffed the hot pot into the oil bag and put it in his backpack. At the same time, she stored it in her spatial storage. Soon, the sound got closer and closer. After a while, Dajiang ran over in a sorry state. As he ran, he turned around and said, "Run." What happened? "Pythons, 2 pythons are coming this way." 2? The few of them quickly packed up and prepared to leave. However, the 2 pythons moved very quickly and arrived in front of him in a short while. Moreover, they looked very agile. They instantly wrapped around a big tree at the side and swooped towards them with their mouths wide open. Gu Yundong quickly jumped up and dodged to the side. The crossbow in her hand shot out with a whoosh. At the same time, Shao Qingyuan aimed his bow at the same python. Dai Wenhuo and the other 2 dealt with the other one, but he was very surprised. At this time, the pythons should be hibernating. Even if they weren't hibernating, they shouldn't be so agile. Chapter 740, Dai Wenhuo grabs Gu Yundong and runs away. Dajiang pointed at the stomach of one of the pythons. It was bulging and looked like there was something inside. Dai Wenhuo suddenly remembered the traces of people passing by on the ground and immediately understood. Someone must have disturbed these 2 pythons, and they were swallowed? Dai Wenhuo frowned. How long have they been swallowed? She wondered if they could be saved. Dajiang shook his head. From the looks of it, it's been a few hours. There's no hope. Dai Wenhuo did not ask further and began to focus on dealing with the pythons in front of him. They were all skilled people and had sharp weapons in their hands. It was not difficult to kill the pythons. Therefore, not long after, the pythons could not defeat their encirclement and fell to the ground with a bang. The other one suddenly went crazy. Its tail wrapped around the tree and its head began to hit the other trees crazily. Gu Yundong quickly dodged to the side to prevent the branches from hitting her. Unexpectedly, just as she dodged, she bumped into Dai Wenhuo, who was walking over. Just as she was about to curse him for getting in her way, something suddenly fell in front of her. Gu Yundong's expression changed slightly and her pupils constricted. Dai Wenhuo screamed, "Run!" Then she subconsciously grabbed Gu Yundong's wrist and ran forward. Gu Yundong was speechless. Shao Qingyuan hurriedly chased after him. "Yundong!" Gu Yundong did not even have time to respond. At this critical moment, Dai Wenhuo, this lunatic, was extraordinarily fast. She did not even have the time to stop when she was dragged forward. She could only hear Shao Qingyuan's cries and buzzing. The sound was so stimulating that it made one's scalp tingle. She inadvertently glanced at her head and was shocked by the huge hornets behind her. Wasn't this too much? Hearing the buzzing sound getting closer and closer, Dai Wenhuo sped up. Gu Yundong was caught off guard and fell forward. However, before she could fall, Shao Qingyuan, who had rushed up from behind, had already picked her up and carried her on his shoulder before running forward. Gu Yundong was speechless. She lay on Shao Qingyuan's shoulder with a look of despair. In the end, she dug into her pocket and took out 2 masks. She put one on her face. Then, she turned around with great effort and put it on Shao Qingyuan. After running for an unknown period of time, the buzzing sound behind them finally became softer and softer. In the end, they could no longer hear it. Only then did they slowly exhale and stop. The situation was urgent just now, so Shao Qingyuan did not think too much about it. He only wanted to catch up to Gu Yundong as soon as possible. Only then did he realize that he should not have run like this. He squatted down to check on Gu Yundong. "Are you all right?" Gu Yundong was fine, but she felt uncomfortable from the bumps. This was a mountain road. She had already tried her best to control herself when she was carried like this on the mountain road without vomiting. Gu Yundong did not want to speak. She sat on a rock at the side and gently rubbed her stomach. She took out some preserved sour fruit and stuffed it into his mouth. Shao Qingyuan took out a water bag and fed her 2 mouthfuls. Then he went to see Dai Wenhuo and the other 2. Dai Wenhuo was fine, but Dajiang, who was at the back, had been stung in 2 places. His situation was not good now. His face was swollen and painful, accompanied by dizziness. He could not stand steadily. Shao Qingyuan quickly walked over. "Let him sit down first. I'll help him squeeze the venom out first." He asked Gu Yundong for vinegar and asked Dai Yi to apply it on him. Then, he said, "I'll go nearby to look for the purple flower earth ding." After saying that, he stood up. However, just as he raised his head to look around, he frowned. Chapter 741. Alone they were lost. Shao Qingyuan pursed his lips. He wasn't afraid of getting lost. If he was given more time, he could still find his way. However, Dajiang had been stung by the hornets. He definitely could not stay in the deep mountains anymore. He had to get out as soon as possible. As Shao Qingyuan found the purple flower earth ding and crushed it for Dajiang to ease the pain, he lowered his eyes and thought about leaving the mountain. Dai Wenhuo had no intention of continuing to search. He came over to discuss with Shao Qingyuan. He also had a map in his hand. It was about the villages around the 9 Tigers Mountain. Shao Qingyuan was more familiar with the 9 Tigers Mountain. Based on the time and route when they entered the mountain, he could roughly guess where they were now. "Let's go out of the mountain first. This way, it should be between Shaoshi village and Hashan village." Dai Wenhuo nodded. After resting for a while, he helped Dajiang out of the mountain. Fortunately, although Dai Wenhuo led everybody on the wrong way for a while, he was aiming out of the mountain. Therefore, when the group saw the village, the sky had just darkened. The few of them heaved a sigh of relief and quickened their pace. Just as they reached the foot of the mountain, they bumped into a young man carrying a basket on his back. The young man was stunned for a moment. "Who are you?" After staying in the mountains for so many days, especially in the end, when they almost lost their shoes to avoid the hornets, they were in a sorry state. Gu Yundong, on the other hand, was better off. Hence, she went forward and asked, "May I ask where this is? We lost our way hunting in the mountains and finally found our way." The young man's eyes widened. "You guys went deep into the mountains?" He then looked at Dajiang, who clearly did not look too good. "Is he injured?" "He was stung by hornets," Gu Yundong said. The young man quickly said, "Then we have to find a doctor to take a look first. If a hornet stings someone, it will kill them. This is Qingyuan village. My house is down there. Why don't you go to my house to rest first?" As he spoke, the youth tightened the basket on his back and hurriedly led the way. Qingyuan village? This didn't seem to be within the range of Shaoshi village to Hashan village. It seemed that they had deviated from the route, but fortunately, They had a place to stay after leaving the mountains. The few of them followed the youth down the mountain. Gu Yundong chatted with him as they walked. Only then did she understand that the young man's name was Qin Shu. He was only 13 years old this year and was even younger than Gu Yundong. Qingyuan village was very remote and extremely poor. There was a river separating it from Qinbei village on the other side. The two small villages were in the mountains, so it was not easy to get out of town. There were less than 200 people in the entire village, and the land was very barren. However, Qin Shu seemed to be very happy. He said, "There are very few outsiders in our village. It's very cold. However, you're lucky. There's a doctor in our Qingyuan village. Although he can't treat serious diseases, he can deal with hornet stings. I'll look for him later. You guys rest first." As they spoke, Qin Shu had already led them to a small courtyard. Qin Shu opened the courtyard door and put down the basket on his back. He called them in to sit. "I'll get you some water." Gu Yundong sized up the courtyard in front of her. It was very small and dilapidated. There did not seem to be anyone in the house except for Qin Shu. There were only 2 rooms and only one set of things. Gu Yundong and Shao Qingyuan looked at each other and quickly understood that this youth was alone. Chapter 742. Qin Shu poured some water and told them to sit for a while he went out to look for the doctor. Dai followed him. Not long after, a doctor limped over. Actually, Dajiang was much better. Shao Qingyuan had treated him in time and used the right medicine. He was no longer dizzy, but his skin was still swollen and uncomfortable. The doctor checked and only said that it was nothing serious. He told him to rest well, then took 2 copper coins and left. Qin Shu was very happy. He let them sit down first and went to the kitchen to make dinner. Dai then explained what he had seen on the way to invite the doctor. It was indeed as Qin Shu had said. This place was surrounded by mountains on all sides, and there was only one road out of the village. It was bumpy and difficult to walk. There was still a long way to go on the main road outside. No wonder there were no outsiders. This place belongs to Shuanghu County. It takes nearly 6 hours to get to the nearest Anbei town, and it's even further to the county city. Moreover, this village doesn't have a carriage. We can't buy one even if we want to. When Qin Shu came over, he happened to hear this. He said, "Our village doesn't have a carriage, but the village chief has an ox cart. After dinner, he'll help you borrow it." Okay. Qin Shu was still very happy to be able to help them. He was also talkative. When they were eating, he asked them curiously where they came from, what the prefectural city outside was like, if they had been to the capital or seen any big shots. He had many questions, and the yearning he revealed made Gu Yundong think of Yunshu. When she was still in Gu village, Yunshu's eyes were filled with desire and curiosity for the outside world. Therefore, she would answer Qin Shu whenever she could. Qin Shu was indeed satisfied. After dinner, he brought the few of them to the village chief's house. Gu Yundong already knew that Qin Shu had lost his parents when he was young. His father had passed away long ago and his mother had remarried. It was said that she had left Qingyuan village and gone outside. No one knew where she was now. Perhaps, this was also one of the reasons why Qin Shu was curious about the outside world. Qin Shu grew up eating from hundreds of families. As he was also a member of the Qin family, the village chief took good care of him. The village chief already knew that Qin Shu had brought a few lost strangers from the depths of the mountains. The village was only so big, so everyone knew about the slightest accident. Compared to Qin Shu's pure enthusiasm, the village chief was clearly much more cautious. He sized up the 3 people standing in front of him. Although they were all wearing rough clothes, it was not difficult to tell that these 3 people were people who lived extremely well. Wenhuo, in particular, was much more distinguished than the young masters of the rich families he had seen in the county city. As the village chief watched, he felt uncomfortable. He shifted his body slightly to control the urge to stand up and give up his seat to them. He coughed lightly and asked, "You want to borrow the ox cart to go to the county city?" "Yes." It was Wenhuo who spoke. "Don't worry, village chief. We won't borrow it for nothing. We won't give you any less money." Gu Yundong rubbed her forehead. "Young master, you're too direct. The village chief shifted uncomfortably again. It's not impossible for you to borrow my ox cart, but who will drive it? Originally, my son could send you there, but he hasn't been feeling well these 2 days and can't go out. Qin Shu immediately said, I can send them there. The village chief glanced at him and said in frustration, You? Are you sure? Chapter 743. She likes this place. Qin Shu met the village chief's gaze and suddenly realized something. He immediately lowered his head silently and did not speak. Indeed, the next moment, the village chief said speechlessly, You haven't even been to the county city. How can you send them there? You may be unable to find your way back by then. Qin Shu scratched his head, feeling a little troubled. After a while, he turned around and asked Yundong, I've never been to the county city, but I've been to town. Can I send you to town? There are carriages in town too. You can buy one. Sure. Qin Shu's eyes lit up and he suddenly turned to look at the village chief. Village chief, she said that it's okay. The village chief was speechless for a long time. He sighed and said, All right, you can send them off. Qin Shu happily went to the backyard to fetch the ox cart, leaving Wenhuo to discuss the price of renting the ox cart with the village chief. In the end, he gave them 1 tael of silver and the village chief sent them out. Actually, Yundong had also thought about not borrowing an ox cart. It was just walking. It was not like she had never walked before. However, she did not know if Dajiang would be able to completely recover tomorrow. Moreover, Shao Qingyuan felt that if the conditions allowed it, he still wanted Yundong to walk less. Fortunately, Dajiang was much better when the group set off early the next morning. Other than his slightly swollen face, there was nothing uncomfortable about him. He was not even willing to take the ox cart and insisted on walking by himself. It was Wenhuo who shouted at him. Yundong was the last to leave the Qin family's courtyard. When no one was paying attention, she placed 2 bags of rice and flour into the rice jar in the kitchen. They were all taken out from her spatial storage. With the hiking bag as a cover, Qin Shu would only think that she had taken it out of her bag. The Qin family's conditions were really not good. The 5 of them ate at his house twice and finished the last bit of flour. This child was too generous. Seeing that they were all grown men, he gave them a lot. As he only took out coarse grain buns, he felt very embarrassed. Fortunately, there were no outsiders in this village. Otherwise, this kid would probably be robbed. However, it could be seen that although there were not many people in Qingyuan village, their relationship was very harmonious. Otherwise, Qin Shu, who had no parents since he was young, would not have developed such a personality. He had probably received the care and help of the villagers since he was young and was filled with gratitude. Moreover, she heard a neighbor quietly come over and asked Qin Shu if there was enough food at home. After putting down the rice and flour, Yundong came out with the hiking bag. The ox cart was already set up, but there were too many people. It was impossible for everyone to sit on it. Yundong was a woman, so Shao Qingyuan was the first to help her up. In addition to Dajiang, there were only 2 people in the carriage. Even Qin Shu could not sit. The farmers cherished the ox very much. If it was not necessary, they could not bear for it to suffer. If it were not for the injured and the woman among them, Qin Shu would not have helped to borrow the ox cart from the village chief's house. The group walked towards the entrance of the village. On the way, many people from the village looked at them curiously. Yundong looked over. These people smiled, and some children hid away shyly. Yundong suddenly liked this village very much. It was a very peaceful, simple, and friendly village. Although it was remote, it actually felt like a paradise. It was only when they were outside the village that Yundong slowly retracted her gaze and looked at the narrow road that led to town. Although they had set off early in the morning, the journey was really long. It was not until noon that they finally arrived at Anbei town. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. At first, Qin Shu was too embarrassed to eat, but seeing that everyone was not eating anymore, he felt that he could not waste it. He gritted his teeth and moved his chopsticks. In the end, Almost the entire fish went into his stomach. He felt that it was very delicious and thought that he could tell everyone when he got back. This restaurant's braised fish was indeed worthy of its reputation. After eating and drinking their fill, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Although the food in this restaurant was not good, it was still much hotter and more delicious than the food in the mountains. Qin Shu was very embarrassed. He seemed to have eaten quite a lot too. At this moment he did not rest anymore. He stood up and said, "Independent Illinois, go pull the ox out first." After the few of them entered the restaurant, the waiter brought the ox to the backyard to eat grass. He hurriedly stood up and opened the door of the private room. A few people happened to pass by outside and were shocked by his sudden action. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 745. Very similar. One of them saw that Qin Shu was dressed in tattered clothes and could not help but scold, "Be careful. Can you afford to compensate if you bump into him?" As soon as he finished speaking, Shao Qingyuan suddenly raised his head and looked at the man who spoke. His eyes narrowed. Wenhuo, who was beside him, wanted to retort, but Shao Qingyuan stopped him. Those people only said this before leaving. Qin Shu also hurried out of the private room and went to the backyard to fetch the ox cart. As soon as the door of the private room closed, Wenhuo looked at Shao Qingyuan, who had a serious expression on his face. "Why are you stopping me?" Yundong said at the same time, "Do you know the man who spoke?" Shao Qingyuan was actually a little uncertain. His voice sounds familiar, and his eyes are very similar. After a pause, he turned to Yundong and said, "Do you still remember that we encountered a group of robbers on the way to Qingyuan Prefecture with the escort agency to transport the 4 jars of wine from the Tao family?" "You mean?" Shao Qingyuan nodded. Back then, the leader of the robbers said a few words. I heard it, and it was the same voice as that person just now. Although their faces were covered back then, their eyes were exposed. The man's eyes were also very similar to that person's just now. When they encountered the robbers back then, although they were all safe and sound in the end, those people really wanted their lives. If Yundong had not put the 4 jars of wine into the space on the spot, the robbers would have thought that they had robbed an empty carriage and turned around to leave. Perhaps they would have been injured or killed. Later on, this matter was reported to the government office. The government office also sent people to investigate, but unfortunately, they found nothing. After Shao Qingyuan and the others returned to Fengkai County, they had also told Tao Feng, the eldest son of the Tao family. Unfortunately, Tao Feng didn't have any clues, so they still didn't know where these robbers had come from or where they had escaped to. However, he did not expect to see someone suspected of being a robber in this small Anbei town. "Shall we go and take a look?" Shao Qingyuan nodded and followed Yundong out. However, he was stopped by Wenhuo. "Since he's seen you before, you'll be easily discovered if you go." He called Dai. "Follow them and take a look. Be careful not to be discovered." "Yes." Dai quickly left the private room and Shao Qingyuan sat back down. Dai had experience in this aspect, so it was indeed more suitable for him to go. After a quarter of an hour, Dai returned. His expression was a little serious, but he shook his head at them and said, "There's nothing unusual. They should just be here to eat." Yundong and Shao Qingyuan looked at each other and did not ask further. They stood up and said, "Let's go down first. Qin Shu must be anxious." The few of them went downstairs. As expected, Qin Shu was already waiting outside the restaurant. He was lowering his head and chatting with the cow, looking very happy. Yundong and Shao Qingyuan walked in front, while Wenhuo was a few steps behind. Then, Dai whispered into his ear. Wenhuo's expression suddenly changed. "Are you serious?" "Yeah, he might be related to the guy we're looking for." Wenhuo sneered. "In that case, this trip was not completely fruitless. Young master, should we?" Wenhuo raised his hand. "Keep an eye on them for now. Check their footholds. If they're really related, it's best to follow the trail to where they hid the thing deep in the mountains." "Yes." Dai took a few steps back and turned to leave. Only then did Dai Wenhuo quickly walk forward and catch up to Shao Qingyuan and the others. Chapter 746. What you should have. Qin Shu quickly realized that someone was missing. Dai Wenhuo only explained, I asked him to buy some things. Qin Shu nodded and believed it, but Gu Yundong and Shao Qingyuan did not. Dai Yi's expression was not right when he returned just now. He must have kept something to himself. However, they also knew that Dai Wenhuo and Qin Wenjing had tried their best not to involve them. The less they knew, the better. Everyone tacitly ignored the abnormality and went to the carriage shop to buy a carriage. Gu Yundong originally wanted to rent one, but she had encountered the robber previously. In order to avoid more trouble, she bought a carriage and drove back. Seeing that his mission was completed, Qin Shu heaved a huge sigh of relief and sat on the ox cart with a smile. Brother Shao, Brother Dai, Sister Gu, this is it. I wish you all a safe journey. Sister Gu, thank you for telling me so much about the outside world. I'll remember your words. Goodbye. He was about to leave when Gu Yundong pulled him aside and gave him 10 taels of silver. We're the ones who should thank you. Take this as our food and accommodation expenses. You can keep it. Qin Shu widened his eyes and quickly retracted his hand. No need, no need. Didn't you treat me to a meal too? I'm already very satisfied after coming to such a good restaurant and eating braised fish. I can't accept this. Take it. Gu Yundong insisted. This is what you deserve. If you really don't want it, then buy something for the people in your village. Didn't you say that they helped you a lot? You can help them now. But this wasn't his money. Even if he helped, he wouldn't be the one helping. But Qin Shu could not win against Gu Yundong's decision. After some thought, he could only say, Then I'll use this silver to buy some rice, flour, grains, and oil and send them to the uncles and aunties in the village. I'll say that you gave them to me. Up to you. If she gave him the money, it would be his. How he dealt with it was his own business. Qin Shu heaved a sigh of relief. Only then did he feel that the silver in his hand was not so hot. However, he was still happy in his heart. After bidding farewell to Gu Yundong and the others, he took the money to buy food, cloth, and daily necessities. He placed them in the ox cart and transported them back. When they returned to the village, someone immediately realized that there were many things on the carriage. Qin Shu chuckled and said that these were all given by those guests. Then, he asked the village chief to help distribute them to everyone. The village chief knew that these were definitely for Qin Shu alone. Only this silly boy would take them all out to share. However, he knew how to be grateful. He knew how to repay his uncles and aunts in the village. It was still very gratifying. The villagers were all sensible people. Some of them refused to accept it and said that they had not helped much. However, if they did not accept it, Qin Shu simply left it at the village chief's house. The village chief was speechless. In the end, it was the village chief who spoke up and helped to distribute them. After that, there was still a lot left for Qin Shu to bring back. When Qin Shu returned home and opened the rice jar, he realized that there were 2 large bags of rice and flour inside. For a moment, his eyes were a little moist. He thought that if he had the chance to see Sister Gu again in the future, he would definitely repay her well. These were all things for another time. On the other side, after Gu Yundong and the others parted ways with Qin Shu, they drove the carriage back. Dai Yi had yet to return. Although Gu Yundong and Shao Qingyuan did not say anything, they were very slow. It was not until the next afternoon that Dai Yi rode his horse over. Chapter 747. Coax Him. After 2 days of recuperation, Dajiang had completely recovered. As soon as Dai Yi arrived, he leaned over and whispered into Dai Wenhuo's ear. The latter's expression instantly turned serious. He said to Shao Qingyuan directly, I have something urgent to attend to and have to leave first. I can't return to Fengkai County with you guys. I'm sorry. Shao Qingyuan naturally wouldn't stop him. All right, let's meet in the Prefectural city another day. Until next time. Until next time. He cupped his fists at Shao Qingyuan and nodded at Gu Yundong. Then, he took the horse that Dai Yi had brought over. He flipped over and jumped. He suddenly shook the reins and ran away like lightning. Dai and Dajiang bade farewell to the two of them and immediately followed. Not long after, the three of them rode further and further away and disappeared from Gu Yundong's sight. She and Shao Qingyuan looked at each other and shrugged. Looks like we have to go back ourselves. The two of them didn't ask or be curious about what urgent matter Dai Wenhuo had. However, without waiting for Dai, the two of them were still much faster. 2 days later, the carriage finally arrived at the town where Yongfu village belonged, Qingyuan town. Looking at the familiar place, Gu Yundong took a deep breath and relaxed. She made Shao Qingyuan slow down. I just returned to Yongfu village for 2 days and am already deep in the mountains. Yunshu will definitely be unhappy if I only go back after so long. I'll buy something to coax him. Yes, perhaps her father had also returned from the prefectural city. She felt that it was probably not enough to buy 1 or 2 things. She would see if there were any novel things in this town. Due to the different directions, they didn't need to pass through Feng County to return from Anbei town. They directly returned to town. Therefore, if they wanted to buy anything, they could only choose from town. Between the town and the county city, Gu Yundong was more familiar with the county city. She had only visited the town a few times. Now, she realized that there seemed to be a few more shops in this town that sold canned food. Gu Yundong and Shao Qingyuan went in to take a look. Although the shop assistant was enthusiastic, the can was different from her product. She held the bottle to her nose and smelled it. She even smelled a strange smell. This was because the seal was not done properly. Enduring her discomfort, she quickly ran out. She was no longer curious about the canned food in the other shops. She should focus on choosing a gift for Yunshu. Every time she picked a gift, Gu Yundong felt like her head was going bald. She had a terrible headache. However, there were not many novel things in this town. They were not even as many as in her spatial storage. Gu Yundong stopped in her tracks. Yes, she could make a few things according to the things in the space, just like the puzzle from before. Whether it was her mother, Yunshu, Yunke, or even her father, they were all very interested. What did children like? Gu Yundong thought about it and her eyes lit up. Got it. She would get someone to make it when she got back. Gu Yundong felt slightly relieved now that she had an idea. Just as she was about to get back into the carriage, someone patted her on the shoulder. She turned around in surprise and saw Shao Qingyuan pointing at a stall not far away. Well, Yunshu will like it. Gu Yundong looked in the direction he was pointing and saw a kite stall. All kinds of colorful kites swayed slightly in the breeze, as if they were waving at you. But Gu Yundong looked at a shop at the back through an angle revealed by the shaking kite. Chapter 748. Reluctance. Gu Yundong's eyes flashed with joy. She said to Shao Qingyuan, "Wait for me there first. I'll be back soon." Shao Qingyuan wanted to say that he could accompany her to buy it, but Gu Yundong had already run out. However, someone asked him to make way from behind, so Shao Qingyuan could only lead the carriage to the side. But when he looked up again, Gu Yundong was nowhere to be seen. The kite stall was still there, but Gu Yundong was not there. Didn't she go to buy a kite? Where did she go? At this moment, Gu Yundong was already standing in the shop behind the kite stall. This was a shop that sold bows and arrows. Other than bows and arrows, it also sold some materials for bows and arrows. The business looked ordinary, but the shopkeeper sat happily at the door drinking tea and basking in the sun. He did not seem to care much. When he saw Gu Yundong enter, he slowly stood up and asked with a smile, "Miss, do you want to buy a bow or a custom-made bow? How long does it take to customize a bow?" The shopkeeper smiled and said, "That depends on what you need. An ordinary one can be obtained in 10 days to half a month. If you want top-notch materials, it might take half a year to a year." That long? Gu Yundong frowned. Wasn't this too long? After some thought, she asked, "Then how much are the best bows and arrows sold here? What are you buying the bow and arrow for? Do you learn to use it at home, or do your brothers use it to practice archery, or do you go hunting in the mountains?" In this day and age, there were different types of bows and arrows. In terms of arrows alone, they were determined by the different uses such as combat, field hunting, school review, signals, and so on. Arrows used for combat were not allowed among the commoners. If they were discovered, they would be captured and executed. As for bows, there were also simple and complicated ones. The price was differentiated by the size and material of the bow. If a girl like Gu Yundong needed it, the bow would most likely have some accessories to make it look good. Gu Yundong listened to the shopkeeper's introduction and was a little curious. So there was such a big difference in bows and arrows? However, the bow and arrows she wanted to buy were mainly used for field hunting. She simply wanted it to be durable. The shopkeeper seemed to be in a good mood and took out a few types for her to see. Gu Yundong took them one by one and tried them out. How should I put it? They don't seem to have much feelings. Although she did not use a bow and arrow, she had a crossbow. Once she picked up this crossbow, the blood in her body would faintly become excited. But the bow in front of her did not make her feel so. The shopkeeper saw her serious expression and laughed. Miss, are you not satisfied with these few? Anything else? Gu Yundong put down the last bow and asked. The shopkeeper hesitated for a moment before saying, "There's one more." He went to the storeroom at the back and carefully moved one out. Gu Yundong's eyes lit up at the first glance. When she took it and tried it, she nodded hurriedly. "I want this." The shopkeeper clicked his tongue. "I can't even bear to sell this bow. You sure know how to choose. Then are you selling it? If you can't bear to part with it, why are you still taking it out? Who are you lying to?" The shopkeeper snorted. "They'll sell it for 12 taels of silver." Gu Yundong gave him a banknote without hesitation. The shopkeeper immediately beamed with joy. "All right, go ahead and pick the arrows. 80 copper coins for an arrow. At least 20 arrows. Since you didn't bargain, I'll give you 5 for free." Chapter 749. Is That Niu Dan? Gu Yundong could not help but feel emotional. No wonder people said that the poor studied books while the rich practiced martial arts. It was not easy for people without any capital to learn martial arts. She bought 100 arrows in one go. It was a little heavy, so she asked the shopkeeper to help move them into the carriage. Unexpectedly, just as she turned to leave, she saw Shao Qingyuan standing at the door in a daze. Her eyes lit up and she ran to him with her bow. "Why are you here?" "Why, did you buy the bow and arrows?" Shao Qingyuan's voice was low as he asked uncertainly. Gu Yundong's eyes curved into crescents. "Of course they're for you." She handed the bow in her hand to him and went back to get the quiver. The shopkeeper at the side shouted, "Hey, miss, you already have someone to help carry it. I'm old, so I won't go." Gu Yundong glared at him. "Shopkeeper, I bought so many things, but you didn't even carry them for me. This is not how this business works." Then, she took her quiver and walked to the door to push Shao Qingyuan out. "Let's go, we'll just take this." The shopkeeper felt that this person was too shameless. She bullied the old man and he regretted giving her those 5 arrows for free. But he had no choice. He could only follow with the remaining arrows. After the 3 of them carried the bow and arrows into the carriage, Gu Yundong thanked the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper snorted and turned to leave. Gu Yundong shook her head. "I'm the only one who doesn't mind. Otherwise, with this attitude, it would be strange if the shop could continue operating. Isn't that right, Brother Shao?" As she spoke, she turned around and saw Shao Qingyuan's lips curl up as if he was very happy. "What's wrong with you?" Gu Yundong waved her hand in front of him, but Shao Qingyuan grabbed her wrist. Gu Yundong was stunned. She quickly looked around and pulled her hand out. "We're on the streets." This person was getting bolder. Shao Qingyuan said, "I have a bow and arrows. Why are you giving these to me? Your bow and arrows have been used for a long time. Last time, I said that I would give you my crossbow, but you refused. The bow and arrows are the treasure of that shop. I tested the feel of it. It's not bad. How did you feel when you held it just now?" "Very good." Every gift from her was great. Gu Yundong was relieved. Seeing that his gaze was becoming more and more passionate, he hurriedly coughed and said, "I haven't bought my kite yet. I'll go buy a kite." Before she could finish speaking, she quickly fled. Shao Qingyuan looked at her back view, his heart warm. He looked at the bow and clenched it tightly. When Gu Yundong returned, she was holding 4 kites. There were 4 kites and 4 patterns, but the colors were a little monotonous. Gu Yundong wondered if she should go back and paint them by herself. At this moment, her expression was much better. She carried the kites and got into the carriage. Let's go back. The corners of Shao Qingyuan's mouth curled up slightly. He didn't look at her anymore. The carriage drove towards the entrance of the town again. Gu Yundong heaved a sigh of relief. When the kites were put down, she lifted the curtain and looked outside. Although the town was not comparable to the county, it was still very lively. But very quickly, this liveliness was heard by Gu Yundong along with this discordant voice. She turned her head slightly and frowned. She quickly said to Shao Qingyuan, "Brother Shao, stop the carriage first." As soon as the carriage stopped, Gu Yundong quickly lifted the curtain and pointed at a figure not far away. "Is that Niu Dan?" Chapter 750, I'll uphold justice for you, let's go take a look. Shao Qingyuan jumped down from the shaft, and so did Gu Yundong. The two of them took a few steps forward and arrived at the entrance of a school. Wasn't this school the Wenhuo hall where she had sent Yunshu over but was not satisfied with that pedantic teacher? Niu Dan was indeed studying here. However, the current Niu Dan was standing outside the school, shouting that he had been wronged. His book basket had fallen to the ground and he did not have time to pick it up. His face was filled with stubbornness, but his eyes were red. He seemed to want to enter the school again to look for the master, but he was stopped by the gatekeeper. There were still a few students standing behind the door, pointing and laughing at him. Gu Yundong's expression darkened. She immediately pushed aside a bystander and called out, "Niu Dan." Niu Dan turned his head. When he saw that it was Gu Yundong, the emotions that he had been suppressing instantly collapsed. As if he finally had someone to rely on, he burst into tears. Large drops of tears fell. "Sister Yundong." Gu Yundong quickly took 2 steps forward, squatted down, patted his shoulder, and wiped his tears with a handkerchief. "What's wrong? What happened? Tell me. I'll help you." For a moment, Niu Dan cried a little hard and couldn't stop. Therefore, before he could speak, a few students behind the door started shouting loudly. "He stole something. He stole 50 copper coins and was chased out by the teacher." Niu Dan immediately shook his head with all his might. He wanted to explain, but he hiccuped. He was immediately angry and anxious, and his tears fell even more fiercely. Gu Yundong hurriedly patted him. "There's no hurry. Tell me slowly. I believe you didn't steal anything." Niu Dan had been in denial for most of the day. Gu Yundong was the first person to say that she believed him without any explanation. All the grievances seemed to be unimportant at that moment. Someone believed in him. There was no need for him to say anything. There was no need for any evidence. Someone stood on his side without any worries. Niu Dan felt that it was enough. His emotions gradually stabilized. Although he was still sobbing, he could clearly say something. "I didn't steal it. I really didn't. My father gave me those 50 copper coins. My father said that I've been studying very hard recently and that I've improved. He rewarded me and told me to buy what I wanted. I just haven't thought of what to buy, so I kept those 50 copper coins with me. It's useless." He wiped his face. But today, Shao Quan suddenly said that he had lost money. Then they searched everywhere. In the end, they found 50 copper coins in my book basket and said that I had stolen it. "Teacher, the teacher said that I was immoral and had a bad character. He chased me out of the school. My 50 copper coins were also taken away." As he spoke, he felt aggrieved again. Niu Dan couldn't take it anymore and cried. When the others heard this, they whispered to each other. However, the few students behind the door shouted, "You were the one who stole it. How could you say that your father rewarded you? Who doesn't know that you're a poor boy from the countryside? Is your father so generous that he gave you 50 copper coins to spend as you please? No one will believe this." That's right. If your father really dotes on you, would he be willing to let you work for the family every weekend? The teacher has already told you several times to focus on your studies and not be affected by other things, but you refuse to listen. Just the rise of one place on the ranking was considered improvement? Is your father willing to give you so much money? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 751. Tear down your school. I got 3rd place last time. My father only gave me 5 copper coins to buy candy. My family owns a shop in town. How dare your father give you 50 copper coins? Are you kidding me? You stole Xiao Quan's money. Don't deny it. It's useless even if you call your sister over. Do you think she dares to settle scores with the teacher? Our teacher is an elementary scholar, and your sister is just a country bumpkin. The veins on Gu Yundong's forehead throbbed as she listened. Niu Dan was even more anxious. Not only did these people scold and slander him, they even slandered Sister Yundong. They were too much. However, Qingyuan raised his head and looked at the students with a sharp and cold gaze. Among the few students, the oldest was only 13 or 14 years old. Once Qingyuan became ferocious, he could even scare an adult man, let alone these bookworms who only knew how to act tough and never see the world. Immediately, someone trembled and took a few steps back. The others suddenly stopped shouting and did not even dare to breathe loudly. Niu Dan looked at Gu Yundong uneasily. Sister Yundong, it's fine. I'll seek justice for you. Putting aside the fact that Niu Dan often came to her house and called her elder sister all day long, his enthusiastic look made Gu Yundong treat him as a younger brother. He had such a good relationship with Yunshu. His father worked in her workshop and his grandfather was Qin Liang. She could not ignore it. No matter what, she had to clear his name and take back the money that belonged to him. Gu Yundong believed that Niu Dan had 50 copper coins as pocket money. This was the red packet she had given Chen Jinbao. At that time, she heard Chen Jinbao mutter that Niu Dan had been improving in his studies recently and he would give him a reward. She patted Niu Dan's shoulder and stood up. She looked at the gatekeeper and said, "Call your teacher out." The gatekeeper snorted. "You think you can tell me what to do?" The gatekeeper seemed to be different from the one Yundong had seen before. Compared to this, the gatekeeper from last time was much more polite. Qingyuan saw his arrogant look and suddenly took 2 steps closer to him, kicking the door behind him. "Go and call him." "You, how dare you? Do you know what this place is?" Qingyuan looked at him coldly. "I'll give you 10 seconds. If I don't see the teacher, I'll tear down your school." The gatekeeper's expression changed. Seeing that the man did not seem to be joking, he could only point at him with a trembling finger. You wait." Then, he quickly turned around and stumbled to call for help. Niu Dan looked at Qingyuan in a daze. He used to be very afraid of him. He had personally seen Qingyuan throw a child into the water and almost drown him. After listening to Yunshu's brainwashing, his impression of Qingyuan changed slightly, but he was still afraid. Who knew that Sister Yundong would be engaged to him? Niu Dan felt that this was like a dream. For this reason, he didn't dare to go to the Gu family for a few days. Later on, even if he went to the Gu family and often met Qingyuan, he never spoke to him. However, he did not expect that one day, this man called Wolf Cub would actually stand in front of him. He was so tall and majestic, like a mountain, as if he could help him block all the wind and rain. Niu Dan felt that he was actually not scary at all. He felt that he had let the man down by calling him a wolf cub in the past. He felt a little sad. At this moment, the gatekeeper came out with the master of the academy. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 752. Your request is strange. Before the teacher reached the door, he said angrily, "Who dares to cause trouble here?" The gatekeeper followed behind him. He pointed in the direction of Qingyuan and Gu Yundong and added fuel to the fire. They seemed to be Chen Jingwen's siblings. They heard that Chen Jingwen was chased out of the school and came over to defend him. Chen Jingwen did such an unbearable thing and didn't allow anyone to say it. That man almost kicked the door down. The other students, who were so frightened by Shao Qingyuan that they did not dare to speak, also went forward to complain as if they had found a backer. That's right, teacher. They're barbarians. No wonder Chen Jingwen dared to steal money. It's because his family has such a brother and sister who can't differentiate right from wrong. His sister also said that no matter what Chen Jingwen said, she would believe him. The master's expression was ugly. He stood at the door in a few steps. He glanced at Shao Qingyuan, then his cold gaze landed on Niu Dan. He was a teacher after all. Niu Dan was a little afraid of him and subconsciously took a small step back. Yundong sneered and took 2 steps forward. She looked at the teacher and said, "The teacher is here. That's good. I want to ask, do you have any evidence that our Chen Jingwen stole someone else's money?" The teacher frowned. He did not talk to women. Hence, he looked at Shao Qingyuan. "Are you Chen Jingwen's brother?" Shao Qingyuan couldn't even be bothered to look at him. The teacher immediately said angrily, "I'm talking to you. Don't you even know the most basic etiquette?" Shao Qingyuan finally gave him a look and said, "She's talking to you. Are you deaf?" The teacher was so angry that his chest heaved. After a long while, he said, "I don't talk to women. I don't talk to brainless people." Yundong almost laughed out loud. Shao Qingyuan's mouth was so sharp. She secretly applauded him. "You're saying that I'm brainless? I'm an elementary scholar. I'm a dignified elementary scholar. I'm rich and knowledgeable. To be able to teach here, compared to a country bumpkin like you, our difference is simply heaven and earth. You actually say that I'm brainless." Yundong finally could not help but laugh. This is the first time I've heard someone praise themselves so exaggeratedly in front of so many people without batting an eyelid. How shameless. What did you say? This time, he was willing to talk to the woman. Yundong smiled. "As expected, you're deaf. I say you're shameless." "Say that again." Yundong was surprised. "This is the first time I've heard such a strange request. Since you're so sincere, I'll reluctantly repeat again. I say you're shameless." The teacher was so angry that he almost fainted. If not for the gatekeeper supporting him from behind, he would have fallen to the ground and made a fool of himself. However, he was still so angry that he could not say a word. Yundong asked, "Can we talk nicely now? If not, I won't stand on ceremony." The teacher's expression became even uglier. This was a threat, a threat. He did not expect this woman to be so shameless and despicable at such a young age. Then he'll ask again. Why did the teacher conclude that Chen Jingwen stole the 50 copper coins? Why did he think that the 50 copper coins were not given to him by his father? Where's the evidence? On the basis that he has a criminal record and is a habitual thief. Before the teacher could speak, a cold shout suddenly came from inside. Immediately after, Yundong saw a familiar figure walk out. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 753, Unworthy of Being a Teacher. After the figure came out, the teacher immediately stepped forward and asked, "Madam, why are you here?" Madam's son said, "I heard that a woman was present. I thought that you would definitely be troubled, so I came out to take a look." The teacher sighed and nodded. "That's true. This woman is very tricky." Yundong almost burst out laughing when she heard that. Were the two of them out of their minds? Would he be put in a difficult position just because she was present? Was it difficult for her to ask 2 questions? Madam's son had already turned around and looked straight at Yundong. She said, "If you have any questions, you can ask me. You don't have to hold on to my husband." Yundong chuckled. "Who was holding on to your husband?" It was as if she had taken a fancy to this old man. This woman felt too good about herself. "All right, since you two are husband and wife, I won't stand on ceremony." Her eyes darkened. That moment of coldness actually made Madam's son a little afraid. "Did you just say that Chen Jingwen is a habitual thief?" Yundong sneered. "What else has he stolen? Since such a thing has happened in the past, why didn't you deal with it in the past and chase him out of school?" Madame Sun did not expect her to hit the nail on the head the moment she spoke. She immediately choked. After a moment, she raised her chin slightly and said, "In the past, it was because there was no evidence." "You call him a habitual thief without any evidence?" Gu Yundong was simply shocked by their train of thought. "So this is what you teach here? Just because Qingyuan is a country boy, he is the suspect whenever anything is stolen. Then he's called a habitual thief without any evidence showing that he stole anything. Then, based on that, he's guilty again when some student lost something, and he's chased out of school without even having the chance to explain himself." Gu Yundong burst out laughing and looked at the surrounding crowd. "Did you hear that, everybody? I thought that the teacher of this Wenhuo Hall was just pedantic. Now I realize that he's not pedantic, but blind, paranoid, arrogant, irresponsible, and self-righteous. Teacher? Can someone like him be a teacher? If his students become high scholars and officials in the future, they will make groundless judgments based on their guesses too, right? How many innocent people will go to prison? This is simply disregarding human lives." The onlookers couldn't help but nod. That's right. The teacher and his wife said that the child was a thief, but where was the evidence? To be honest, I used to think that this teacher was different from the other teachers I saw in other schools. He was always mysterious. When a woman brought a child to his door, he looked like he had seen a rat or a cockroach. It was as if everyone would like him. I think so too. I don't think the teachers of the other schools are as hard to satisfy as him. This girl is right. They're spreading this news without any evidence. Just now, this child was crying so miserably over there. One look and you can tell that he was wronged. This teacher is like a dog. Look at what that Madame Sun is saying. Habitual thief? So it's all based on their own guesses. Then, if my family lost a chicken, can it be said that they stole it? Anyway, I saw her pass by my house, so I guess so. When Madame Sun heard the dissatisfied voices of the surrounding crowd, she saw that they were all standing on Gu Yundong's side. She immediately said angrily, But I have witnesses. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 754. The so-called witness. As soon as he said that, the whispers in the surroundings instantly stopped. Everyone looked at each other. Witness? Gu Yundong also raised her eyebrows. Witness? Where are they? Madame Sun sneered and shouted into the door, "Sister-in-law Wu, tell me, is this Qingyuan dirty? Did he steal your things in the past?" There was no movement inside the door for a long time. After a long time, a figure slowly walked out. Gu Yundong was stunned. It was her? Chen Yulan's husband, Wu Chang's mother. Madame Wu dawdled to Madame Sun's side. Madame Sun looked at Gu Yundong and said, "Madame Wu's daughter-in-law is Qingyuan's cousin. The last time her son got married, Qingyuan also went. In the end, there were a few gifts missing from the house. Later, they found out that Qingyuan took them all. Isn't he used to stealing?" Qingyuan was also stunned. Of course, he knew Madame Wu. After hearing Madame Sun's words, he hurriedly shook his head and said, I didn't take her things at all." Gu Yundong found it extremely funny. She looked at Madame Wu coldly. "I'll say it again. Where's the evidence?" Madame Wu felt a little guilty. She stammered and whispered, "It's been so long. Where's the evidence?" "Oh, so this is still your guess?" Madame Wu could not raise her head. Gu Yundong's teasing gaze landed on the teacher. The way Master Wen handles things is really impressive. On one hand, he says that he doesn't talk to women, but on the other hand, he can suspect his student of stealing and chase him out of the school because of a woman's unreasonable guess. The teacher trusts this anti-Wu very much. I'm impressed. Master Wen's expression changed drastically and he quickly explained, I didn't. Just what? Yes, he had indeed listened to his wife's words, which was why he did not have a good impression of Qingyuan. And his wife had also listened to Madame Wu's words and made pillow talk. At the end of the day, the cause was indeed Madame Wu. Master Wen was furious. He suddenly looked at Madame Wu and said, "Tell me, why are you so sure that he stole your things?" Under everyone's gaze, Madame Wu knew that if she did not say anything, she would probably not be able to raise her head in the future. She secretly took a deep breath and suddenly raised her head. It was Qingyuan who stole it. Back then, only he ran into the room where the gift was placed. The thing was gone. If it wasn't him, who took it? I'm an adult. I have no grudges with such a child. There's no reason to wrong him, right? No reason? Gu Yundong sneered. How can there be no reason? Is it not a reason that the Wu family and the Qin family to fall out? Is it not a reason that your son wants to take in a concubine and the Qin family doesn't allow it and comes to your house to settle scores? Your Wu family is in the wrong first. You don't dare to look for the adults, so you schemed against a child. How impressive. After Gu Yundong was done, she looked at Madame's son. So she is your witness, right? This is truly an eye-opener. She made up stuff in front of you because of personal grudges, and you lambasted an innocent child based on that. In the end, your husband blamed everything on him and chased him out of school. Elementary scholar? Teacher? You're simply ruining the kids. Pooey, disgusting. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 755. Admitting mistake. Madame's son's expression changed. She looked at Madame Wu, hoping that she would say more, but Madame Wu was simply making something out of nothing. Facing Gu Yundong's pressure, Madame Wu did not have any confidence. She could only grit her teeth and hold her hands tightly. However, her mind was blank and she could not find any words to refute. Master Wen almost fainted. He felt more and more people around him, and the way they looked at him was getting worse. Even the students who had run out to watch the show began to whisper. Gu Yundong looked at Master Wen. Say something. Where's the evidence? Did a dog eat your conscience when you were hurting a child like this? You, don't pester me here. Because you can't reason with me, you say that I'm pestering you endlessly. Let everyone be the judge. Who's in the wrong in this matter? Who's pestering someone else endlessly and refusing to admit their mistake? Who's disregarding human lives and ruining a child's future? After Gu Yundong finished speaking, someone beside him immediately shouted, I say, Master Wen, you said that the child was a thief. Show me the evidence. That's right. What right do you have to say that the child's father can't give him 50 copper coins as a reward? I even gave my child a tael of silver as New Year's money. I think he just thinks that the child is easy to bully because he came from the countryside and doesn't have a backer. He might as well find a scapegoat. You think you can be a teacher and educate others? Fortunately, my child hasn't come here to study. These few days, I'm thinking of sending my child over to be enlightened. Forget it, he'll go back and find another school. Fortunately, you didn't send your child over. Otherwise, if something was missing from the school, they might even chase your child out. There were more and more voices, and they were getting louder. At this moment, Master Wen wished he could find a hole to hide in. Madame's son glared at Madame Wu fiercely, angry that she was actually using her. In the end, he had no choice. Seeing that the accusations around him were getting louder and louder, Master Wen was afraid that the entire town would be attracted over. He could only take a deep breath and say, This is indeed my mistake. I misjudged Qingyuan. After saying that, he looked at Qingyuan and said, The decision to expel you from the school is cancelled. You're still a student of Wenhuo Hall. Come back to class with me. Gu Yundong wanted to spit in his face. You want to let it go so easily after wronging someone? No way. She looked down at Niu Dan beside her. Are you going back to school? Gu Yundong did not want him to continue, but Niu Dan was not her biological younger brother after all. She could not decide for him on this matter. Unexpectedly, Niu Dan shook his head vigorously. I'm not going. I'm not going to this school to study anymore. Gu Yundong rubbed his head and smiled. She looked up. Did you hear that? When Master Wen heard this, he nodded regretfully. Since you've decided I won't force you. I was your teacher, and I hope that your future will be bright. With that, he turned around and walked in impatiently. However, he had just taken a step when Shao Qingyuan suddenly reached out to stop him. Master Wen was stunned and suddenly looked up. What else do you want? Master Wen is really interesting. Since you admit that you wronged Qingyuan and cleared him of the crime of stealing something, shouldn't you return the 50 copper coins? Master Wen's body stiffened. He turned around abruptly. You, if you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 756, Return the Money. Could it be that what Master Wen said just now was all fake? Your apology was not from the bottom of your heart. It was just a show for others? Master Wen denied it on the spot. Of course not. It's just that Qingyuan said that the 50 copper coins was his, and Liu Xiahui also said that it was his. Both of them, in that case, call Liu Xiahui out. Let's face each other on the spot. How about that? The onlookers expressed that they had not finished watching the commotion and listening to the gossip. Master Wen had to continue making a fool of himself, so they agreed. That's right. Let's confront each other on the spot so that we don't malign the child. Call Liu Xiahui out. Master Wen had no choice. Although he was unhappy, his reputation was more important. Therefore, he asked the students in the school to find Liu Xiahui. Liu Xiahui was about 10 years old and looked older than Niu Dan. He was still a little nervous when he came over. He did not know where to put his hands and feet. Yundong narrowed her eyes and sized him up for a while. When he walked out of the door, she asked, "You said that the 50 copper coins is yours, right?" Liu Xiahui quickly nodded. "It's mine." "In that case, is there any mark on the 50 copper coins?" "Mark?" Liu Xiahui looked surprised and reached into his pocket. He really could not understand what mark there was on the money. He was still young and it was his first time doing such a thing. He could not take it anymore in the face of a wily old fox like Gu Yundong. He lowered his head and did not dare to look up. Gu Yundong continued, "You might not know, but Qingyuan's 50 copper coins were given to him by his father in front of me. Before giving it to him, his father happened to be writing and accidentally knocked over the ink, so the 50 copper coins were stained. I have ink on my 50 copper coins. They were stained when I was doing my writing this morning, so he couldn't finish." In an instant, he felt that his mouth was too fast and that something was wrong. Gu Yundong smiled and asked Niu Dan, "Is there ink on your 50 copper coins?" Niu Dan shook his head. "No, there's no color on my copper coins. Oh, a few copper coins are stained with soil. I plan to wash them properly when I get back." Gu Yundong smiled and looked at Master Wen and the crowd. Did everyone hear that? Now, let's see what the 50 copper coins look like, shall we? Liu Xiahui was too young and flustered. The others were not stupid and could tell that something was wrong in an instant. Master Wen's face was even more ashen. He looked at Liu Xiahui and shouted coldly, "Aren't you going to take out the 50 copper coins?" Liu Xiahui was so frightened that he trembled and took out a string of copper coins. Master Wen looked carefully. There was no ink at all, and there was indeed soil on 2 copper coins. It was obvious who was telling the truth. His cold gaze landed on Liu Xiahui. "Tell me, is this 50 copper coins yours?" Master Wen was usually very dignified. With this solemnness, the kid was immediately frightened to tears. "It's not mine. I accidentally saw Qingyuan counting copper coins in the corner. In a moment of greed, I deliberately said that it was mine. Boo-hoo, I was wrong, Master. Don't chase me away." Master Wen's expression was very ugly. Madame's son, who was beside him, was speechless for a long time. Shao Qingyuan took the string of copper coins from Master Wen and handed it to Niu Dan. "If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 757. Brother Shao, thank you with the money back. Gu Yundong did not want to pester them anymore. She believed that the people's eyes were sharp and the news spread quickly. It wouldn't be long before everyone in this area knew what Master Wen had done today. For a person who valued his reputation more than anything else, it was enough for Master Wen to suffer for a long time. But before she left, Gu Yundong gave him a blow. To find the truth in such a small matter with such a simple question, even I can easily judge it. However, Master Wen made such a simple case so complicated. As expected of the knowledgeable elementary scholar. Today, we have all learned something. Someone couldn't help but laugh. Master Wen finally couldn't take it anymore. His footsteps began to become unstable, and his fingers trembled. Gu Yundong's eyes widened. Was he going to faint again? Was she going to add another feat to her glorious achievements? Unfortunately, Master Wen's resistance was relatively strong. In the end, with the help of the gatekeeper, he held his chest and panted as he entered. Madame Sun also hurriedly covered her face and followed in. The other students lowered their heads and looked at each other. In the end, they quickly turned around and left with faces full of shame. In an instant, only Liu Xiahui and Madame Wu were left at the door. It was the gatekeeper who had returned and pulled the sobbing Liu Xiahui in. Madame Wu stood alone at the door and was pointed at. Gu Yundong glanced at her. She would tell Qingyuan everything about the Wu family. As for how they would deal with it, it was up to them. She looked at the aggrieved and resentful Niu Dan and smiled. Let's go. Niu Dan wiped his face and smiled. He took the 50 copper coins and ran to the side to pick up his basket before following Gu Yundong to the carriage. When he got into the carriage and saw the kite and bow inside, his eyes widened. Sister Yundong, did you buy these for Yunshu? Yundong saw that his eyes were filled with envy and desire. Thinking that he had suffered greatly today, she gave him one. This is for you. Niu Dan looked at her in surprise. You are really giving it to me? You don't like it? Yes, I like it. He hugged the kite, and his face returned to its usual cheerful expression. Gu Yundong heaved a sigh of relief. This child's recovery ability was quite strong. Niu Dan held the kite for a while before carefully putting it down. He then looked up at Gu Yundong and pursed his lips. After a while, he said, Sister Yundong, thank you. You're welcome. Niu Dan lifted the curtain of the carriage again and said to Shao Qingyuan, who was driving, Shao, brother Shao, thank you. I won't call you a wolf cub anymore. You're better than them. Shao Qingyuan was stunned for a moment. In the past, he wouldn't have cared if Niu Dan thanked him or not. But now, he was still expressionless, but he nodded slightly. After some thought, he replied, No need. It's what I should do. Gu Yundong, who was sitting in the carriage, was overjoyed. Then she felt a little sad. In the past, Shao Qingyuan had received malicious intent. Although he had slowly gotten better recently, there were not many people who sincerely respected him. Most of them were just afraid of him. However, she thought that things would definitely get better in the future. Wasn't Niu Dan an example now? At this moment, this little fellow looked at Shao Qingyuan with sparkling eyes filled with admiration. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 758. I should have listened to you long ago. The three of them quickly arrived at Yongfu village in a carriage. Gu Yundong asked them to send Niu Dan back to the Chen family first. When the carriage stopped at the entrance of the Chen family's house, Madame Zhou was returning with a vegetable basket. She was stunned when she suddenly saw Shao Qingyuan sitting on the shaft of the carriage. When the curtain of the carriage opened, Gu Yundong's smiling face was revealed. Madame Zhou immediately smiled and greeted, Yundong, why are you here? Come in quickly. Before she could finish speaking, Niu Dan crawled out. At this moment, Madame Zhou really froze. She rubbed her eyes in confusion. In the next moment, she suddenly slapped her leg. Ayo, Niu Dan, why are you back? Shouldn't you be at school during this hour? When Niu Dan saw his family, the grievance from before surged up again. He immediately ran towards him with tears in his eyes. Grandma, I'm not going to school anymore. Madame Zhou had dropped the basket in her hand. She quickly hugged him and asked, "What's wrong, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Who bullied you? Tell Grandma. Grandma will deal with him." As she spoke, she hurriedly shouted inside, Old Chin, come out quickly. Something happened." Before Gu Yundong could say anything, Madame Zhou already had such a huge reaction. If she said anything later, the woman would probably be even angrier. However, on second thought, it made sense. If her Yunshu was chased out of the school like a thief without distinguishing between right and wrong, she would have the urge to tear down that school. Chen Liang came out very quickly. He was a little more rational than Madame Zhou. Although he was also concerned about why Niu Dan had returned without a hitch, when he saw Gu Yundong and Shao Qingyuan, he invited them in first before asking about the situation. The group of people entered the central room. Madame Song, who was working at the back, also heard the sound and ran over. Gu Yundong tried her best to explain the matter in detail in a calm voice. Before she could finish speaking, she saw Madame Zhou and Madame Song begin to wipe their tears. Their hearts ached as they hugged Niu Dan. Even Qin Liang was so angry that his face turned green. His hands were clenched tightly, and he looked like he wanted to rush over and settle the score with that teacher. After Gu Yundong finished speaking, Madame Zhou gritted her teeth and said, "I knew that the Wu family was not a good thing. Wu Chong is arrogant and the Wu couple is narrow-minded. It's fine if they fell out with our family, but they actually took revenge on a child. I'm so angry. I'm going to tear her apart." Madame Song hugged Niu Dan and nodded vigorously. "I'll go too." Chen Liang took a deep breath. "All right, we still have to consider this matter at length." Then he turned around and said to Shao Qingyuan and Gu Yundong, "Thank you so much for today. If not for you, our Niu Dan would have been ruined." Gu Yundong sighed. "Uncle Chen, don't say that. We're from the same village, and Niu Dan calls me sister. What kind of person would I be if I just stood by and did nothing when something like this happened?" After saying that, Gu Yundong suddenly felt that something was amiss. The seniority seemed to be messed up. However, after today's incident, I'm afraid Niu Dan won't be able to go to school. It's good that Uncle Chen doesn't blame me for blowing things up. Chen Liang waved his hand. "It's fine if he doesn't go to that kind of school. When you told me that the teacher was too pedantic, I should have listened to you. He wouldn't have ended up like this." Gu Yundong did not say anything. Seeing that this family was filled with righteous indignation and wanted to discuss the follow-up matters, she bade farewell with Shao Qingyuan. When she returned to the Gu residence, it was already a little late. Seeing Father Tong at the door, Gu Yundong hurriedly asked, "Are my parents back from the prefectural city? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 759. Knowing that you are unlikable. When Father Tong saw them return, he was instantly happy. This young lady and her future husband had gone into the mountains together. Everyone was filled with worries, especially because they had agreed to only travel for 5 to 6 days, but they had not returned for more than 10 days. Wasn't he excited to see her now? Hence, he did not hear Gu Yundong's question. He hurriedly shouted into the courtyard, "Eldest Miss is back." As soon as he finished speaking, 2 figures rushed out one after another. It was Gu Yunshu and Bian Yuanji. The 2 children hugged her and almost cried. "Big sister, you're finally back. You don't know how worried we were." "Cousin, are you all right?" The 2 of them were at home. At this moment, it was time for them to be given the clothes-making vacation. Qin Wensheng's school was on vacation, and so was Tianhai Academy. Only the Wenhuo Hall that she saw today felt that there was no need to give the students the clothes-making vacation, which would waste their time. In any case, the students were from the nearby villages and towns. There was no need for them to go back and put on more clothes to ward off the cold. That was why Gu Yundong saw Niu Dan at the entrance of that school today. She rubbed the 2 children's heads and said, "Aren't I fine?" Seeing that Yunshu snorted and her eyes were obviously filled with accusation, she quickly pointed in the direction of the carriage and said, "I brought you a gift. Go take a look." The two of them were stunned. They did not care about being angry with her anymore and ran to the edge of the carriage. Shao Qingyuan carried them up. The two of them climbed in and saw the kites inside. The two children's eyes lit up. They sat cross-legged in the carriage and began to choose. There were originally 4 kites, but after giving one to Niu Dan, there were only 3 left. The patterns that Gu Yundong had chosen were all pretty. There was an eagle, a dragonfly, a butterfly, and an owl. Niu Dan took the dragonfly away. Yunshu and Yuanji felt that such a beautiful kite like the butterfly should be left for Kiki. Therefore, one of them chose the eagle and the other chose the owl. They were both flying birds and looked very good. After choosing the kite, the two children got off the carriage in satisfaction. Although Yunshu was happy, he remembered that his eldest sister had only returned after so many days, making him worried and afraid. He immediately turned his head arrogantly and snorted. "Don't think that I won't be angry anymore." Oh, the little guy was pushing his luck. "Then will you return it to me?" "That won't do. Big sister, you're too old to play with kites anymore. You'll have to give it to me later. At that time, you have to find an excuse." How troublesome. "Forget it, I'll accept it." Gu Yundong was speechless. Who said that she did not like to play with kites? She was already too old? She was only coming of age next month. Why was she already old? This little brat would definitely not be able to find a wife in the future. No wonder he blamed his father for not choosing one for him when he was young. It turned out that he knew his limits and knew that he was not likable. Gu Yunshu happily went in with Bian Yuanji with the kite. "Rascal!" Gu Yundong scolded him with a smile. However, when she saw that only the two children had gone out to welcome her, it seemed that her parents had not returned. It was also strange. At this time, Tianhai Academy should already be on vacation. However, she heaved a sigh of relief and entered the Gu residence with Shao Qingyuan. However, just as she took a few steps in, a surprised voice suddenly came from behind. "Miss, Master, Madam and Second Miss are back. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 760. A man among women. Gu Yundong stumbled and almost fell forward. Fortunately, Shao Qingyuan was quick-witted and rushed forward to support her. Gu Yundong looked at him and said softly, "Should I say that we're lucky or unlucky?" It was also very coincidental that they had only returned a step earlier than her parents. Shao Qingyuan laughed. "Let's go and welcome your parents." "Yeah." The two of them turned around. Yunshu and Yuanji, who had also heard the sound, rushed past them and ran to the door. When Gu Yundong walked out of the door, she happened to see Yunshu, Yunke, and Yuanji hugging each other tightly, as if this was the only way to express their affection for each other. The children were jumping around, clearly overjoyed. Even Madame Yang was envious and went forward to hug them. Gu Yundong almost laughed out loud. She hurriedly shifted her gaze to her father. Unexpectedly, Gu Dajiang's face darkened as he looked at her unhappily. Gu Yundong's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he knew that she had been in the mountains for so many days? No way, didn't father just come back? Gu Yundong coughed lightly and asked softly, "Father, why did you only come back today? You still have the cheek to say that?" Gu Dajiang was also very depressed. He snorted coldly. "Your milk tea shop opened yesterday, but a few days ago, Shui Tao came to the Prefectural city and said that you had something on and couldn't come. Eldest Miss Nya asked me to represent you. Otherwise, I would have returned 2 days ago." Gu Dajiang was unhappy. Firstly, he couldn't come back earlier. He had gone back on his word to his wife and daughter, causing Madame Yang and Kiki to lose their spirits. Secondly, he was a man, and the milk tea shop was specially opened to entertain female customers. Although some men came to celebrate the opening day, most of them gave gifts and left. He was the only one who stayed there from the beginning to the end. Those women whispered to each other about him in a strange manner. Gu Dajiang still felt uncomfortable when he thought of that scene. He was a man, and he didn't know where to look when he was in a place full of women. Fortunately, Madame Dai saw through his predicament and let him come back first. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. After listening to the entire process, Gu Yundong could only hold back her laughter and quickly apologize to him. Father, you've worked hard. I know that you did something that you were unhappy about for me. You're the best father in the world. Although Gu Dajiang glared at her, he enjoyed what she said. He let Gu Yundong help him into the courtyard. After entering the courtyard and sitting down, Gu Yundong asked about the situation in the prefectural city. The milk tea was ready. Although Gu Yundong did not attend the opening ceremony, Madame Dai must have known that she had gone deep into the mountains. She had also told him about her family's matters, and briefly mentioned entering the deep mountains. Yunshu, who was at the side, glared at her while remaining silent. He did not say anything about his sister not returning home for more than 10 days. However, when Gu Yundong mentioned the matter of Niu Dan today, the little fellow finally could not take it anymore. He stood up and was about to run towards the Chen family. It was Gu Dajiang who quickly pulled her back. The Chen family must be discussing this matter now. Don't join in the mess. It's the same if you look for him tomorrow. Only then did Yunshu calm down, but he still clenched his small fists and looked angry. Gu Yundong thought of something else. Now that Niu Dan can't go to Wenhuo Hall to study, I don't know which school he will go to next. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 761. He can go to Dongyi Academy. It was not that Gu Yundong had not thought about Qingyuan. However, it was obvious that it wouldn't work. Not to mention how long Qingyuan would have to teach. He had more and more things to do now. He probably didn't have the energy to take in any more students. Ever since Yunshu and Yuanji entered the school, Qingyuan had never recruited anyone again, right? Moreover, although Gu Yundong felt that her relationship with Qingyuan was quite good, she could not rely on this relationship to unscrupulously stuff students into his school. She had already stuffed 2 of them in. Between the two, Qingyuan had taken a fancy to Yunshi's talent, and Gu Yundong had exchanged for Yuanji with conditions. Not on Qin Wenheng's side. As for other places, there were only 2 schools in town, and one was Wenhuo Hall. He would definitely not go there again. The other school valued money too much and demanded high tuition fees. Gu Yundong did not like it. However, Chen Jingkai's son was studying there. This was because Chen Jingkai was a junior manager back then. In addition, his wife's family had some connections with the school, so he let his son study there. Later on, after Chen Jingkai lost his job as the town's junior manager, he had also thought of letting his son go to school after this year. However, now that he had become Gus' assistant, this thought was dispelled. Other than these 2 families, there were also a few small private schools. The teachers were not even elementary scholars. They could only teach the children to read. However, it was obvious that the Chen family sent their children to study and read because of the imperial examination. How could he be satisfied with just a few words? Forget it. These things were not something she could worry about. Chen Liang definitely knew what to do. Gu Yundong was just about to change the topic and talk to her family about other things when she heard Yunshu tilt her head and say, "Actually, he can go to Dongyi Academy." Gu Yundong was stunned. Dongyi Academy? I remember that the teacher of that academy brought his students to make things difficult for you, right? Yes. Yunshu nodded. But that teacher has been removed from the academy and won't be allowed to continue teaching. The dean of Dongyi Academy has also returned and even knows our teacher. He's a pretty good person. Yuanji also nodded at the side. The dean was very angry when he heard about what happened back then. Then he reorganized the academy. A few days ago, our teacher even brought us to Dongyi Academy to discuss knowledge with those students. After the new emperor ascended the throne, the dean of Dongyi Academy went to the capital for the examination. This trip lasted for more than half a year. Later on, he was waiting for the results in the capital. Unfortunately, he still failed in the end. Therefore, when he returned to Fengkai County, a long time had passed. From what Yunshu and the others said, Dongyi Academy was actually a good choice now. If there were no such annoying teachers, with Dongyi Academy's reputation in the county city, it was indeed a good choice. Well, in that case, she could give the village chief a suggestion. As for whether to accept it or not, it was up to them. With this thought in mind, Yundong stopped talking about this matter. She wanted to ask about the milk tea shop, but seeing that it was getting late and everyone had been on the road for the entire day, she let everyone go back to their rooms to rest early. The next morning, Yunshu and Yuanji hurriedly got up and brought Yunka, who was also awake, to look for Niu Dan. However, when the two of them ran to Niu Dan house, they saw that the door was tightly shut. There seemed to be no one in the Chen family. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 762. Seeking justice. Yunshu ran to her neighbor's house to ask around and found out that the Chen family had gone to town. Chen Liang and Madame Zhou were not the only ones. Even Chen Jinbao went to the Gu residence early in the morning to apply for leave from Tong'an. He followed his parents and went to seek justice for Niu Dan angrily. Yunshu and the others could only run back. Gu Yundong was not surprised. The Chen family doted on their two grandsons very much. Even though Chen Liang, the village chief, maintained his dignity with a dark expression all day, how could he sit still after seeing his precious grandson suffer so much? Gu Yundong asked around and heard that it was not just the Chen family. Chen Liang also brought a few young men from the village with him. They looked like they were going to cause trouble. Gu Yundong was not worried, but Yunshu was a little disappointed. He did not see Niu Dan, so he could not join him in the crusade against those bad guys. However, when he saw Yunka come out with his little butterfly kite, he instantly perked up again. Then he hurriedly ran back to his room and took out his owl kite. Let's compete and see whose kite flies the highest. How about that? Yunka ran over. It must be my butterfly. Then let's go to the barnyard. Yuanji was also excited. The three of them took the 3 kites and went out. It was autumn today, and the wind was blowing. It was very suitable for kite flying. They ran out of the door in a hurry and went to the Zheng family's house, pulling Zheng Jia, Zheng Yu, and Zheng Lu away. There were 6 people and 3 kites. 2 people and 1 kite. Back then, Gu Yundong had bought 4 because she wanted to give 1 to Lu Hongqiao. However, among the 4 members of the Lu family who had followed Gu Dajiang back yesterday, only Lu Hongqiao was around. The others had all stayed in the courtyard and did not come back. The group of people ran to the barnyard, and the 3 kites instantly attracted their friends along the way. Therefore, when they arrived at their destination, almost all the children in the village followed them. Many people flew kites, but they couldn't eat or wear them. Their parents in the countryside didn't have the money to buy the kites, so they could only make the kites themselves. The homemade kites were simple and crude. There were a few thin bamboos and some window paper. It was squarish and did not even have a shape, let alone a color. It was so ugly that it made one want to cry. Therefore, the colorful kites that Yunshu and the others took out instantly became the children's favorite. They touched them with their hands. If Yunshu hadn't stopped them, the kites would have shattered into pieces before they could fly into the sky. Fortunately, although he was young, he was already a little dignified in the village. Everyone could only watch but not touch the kites. At most, they could only touch the kite strings. In the end, the kites were finally released into the sky. Looking at the butterfly, eagle, and owl that were getting higher and higher, the children below screamed excitedly. The rising and falling sounds attracted many adults to come out and watch. They wanted to fly the kites too. When Niu Dan returned, he saw such a lively scene when he passed by the barnyard. His eyes lit up. He quickly stopped the ox cart and ran home. He took out his kite and joined. After waiting for him to play happily for a while, Yunshu gave her kite to Zheng Lu and ran to his side to talk to him. Niu Dan, did you go and settle scores with that teacher from Wenhuo Hall today? That's right. Niu Dan was so excited that his face was red. Today, his father, grandfather, and some uncles accompanied him. He actually made Master Wen apologize to him. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 763, I Can Make the Teacher Faint. Yunshu sighed. You should have brought me along. Niu Dan was stunned for a moment. Someone beside him screamed for him to grab the string or the kite would fall. Niu Dan simply handed the string to him and walked to the side to chat with Yunshu. Why should I bring you along? You're small. What if you get bullied? Yunshu shook his head and looked very proud. I won't be bullied. I can make the teacher faint from anger. I'm especially experienced. Are you going there to make the teacher faint from anger? It's fine. Even if you didn't go, my father and the others almost made the teacher faint from anger today. Yunshu's interest was piqued. He pulled his wrist and sat down on a rock at the side. Then tell me, how did you make the teacher faint from anger? Niu Dan immediately twisted his body and started talking. At the same time, Chen Liang sat at the Gu residence and drank tea. He told them about his trip to town today. They went to Wenhuo Hall and met the teacher. Interestingly, Liu Xiaoquan's father also went to the school to settle scores with the teacher. Liu Xiaoquan's father was a butcher. He was originally filled with a ferocious aura and his entire body was filled with muscles. It was said that yesterday, after Master Wen discovered that Liu Xiaoquan was a thief, he brought him back and taught him a lesson in front of all the students. He even made him kneel on the ground for an hour. In the end, he even chased him out of the school and refused to acknowledge him as a student. In the end, after Liu Xiaoquan returned, he said in front of his parents that there was no point in living and that he wanted to hang himself. He only fell asleep after fussing over a whole night. Hence, Father Liu came over early in the morning. When Chen Liang said this, he was still a little angry. Fortunately, Niu Dan met you yesterday, Yundong. Otherwise, he would have been chased out of the school after suffering injustice. The person who wanted to die would have been our Niu Dan. Thinking of this, I feel a lingering fear. Gu Yundong drank her tea silently. No, Uncle Chen, you're thinking too much. I don't think Liu Xiaoquan really wants to die. Otherwise, why would he cause such a ruckus in front of his parents? However, this was also because Liu Xiaoquan was strong. If he were someone who was weak and could not stand being humiliated by Master Wen, he would probably really take things too hard. Actually, there could have been a very good solution to this matter. Stealing money was not right in the first place. After that, it was a huge mistake to frame others. Such a student should be severely punished. As a teacher, what he had to do was to find out the truth and clear Niu Dan's name. Then he would guide and educate the perpetrator. However, Master Wen was not like this. His own reputation had been tainted, so he pushed all the responsibility to Liu Xiaoquan. After deciding to chase him out of the school, he actually had to humiliate him in advance. This kind of person really disgusted her. Chen Liang also felt quite disgusted. Fortunately, Liu Xiaoquan's father was not someone to be trifled with. He had a bad temper to begin with, so when he went to school, he directly carried a butcher knife. As soon as the knife appeared, Master Wen's legs immediately went weak. He immediately apologized to Liu Xiaoquan. When Chen Liang saw this, he immediately asked Chen Jinbao to bring the young men from the village to stand in front of him and start questioning him. Master Wen was so frightened that he almost fainted. He hurriedly apologized to Niu Dan. Coincidentally, when he apologized, most of the students were watching outside. Seeing that the usually dignified and unsmiling teacher was actually so humble and spineless, they could not tell if they were disappointed or disgusted. In short, a few students whose families were relatively wealthy were already considering going to other schools. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 764. Completely disheartened after this incident, Master Wen's reputation was completely ruined. When the onlookers publicized what happened that day, Many of the students' families were very dissatisfied. Gradually, the number of students in Wenhuo Hall decreased. In the end, there were only 5 or 6 left. Because of this, Master Wen blamed his wife, Madame Sunday. If not for her carelessness in making friends and interacting with such a selfish and mean person, he would not have become a knife in her hand to deal with Qingyuan like this. Not only did he lose face, but he could not even be a teacher. Madame Sun felt even more bitter in her heart. She hated Madame Wu so much that she gritted her teeth. She had said a lot of bad things about her outside, and it could be considered that she had completely fallen out with her. Chen Liang's family even got teacher Wen to refund Niu Dan tuition fees before leaving the school with a cold snort. When Father Liu saw Niu Dan, he wanted to settle scores with him. After all, Niu Dan was one of the people who had caused his son to seek death. However, the Chen family had many people. Just standing there made people's hearts beat like drums. Hence, he could only forget about it and leave angrily with his son. After Chen Liang and the others came out of Wenhuo Hall, they went to the Wu family. They had not forgotten that the culprit was Madame Wu. However, the Wu family had guessed that they would come to them, so they didn't come. Chen Yulan was the only one left to deal with them. Chen Yulan was still speaking up for Madame Wu. She even hinted that Niu Dan might really be dirty. Chen Liang had completely given up on her. In the past, he might have wanted to interact less with her, but now he had completely cut ties with her. Just take it that he had let his brother, Chen Tian, down. He would not acknowledge this niece. When Chen Liang told Gu Yundong about this, he was still a little dispirited. He couldn't figure out why things had turned out this way. Chen Yulan, who had married someone else, seemed to have become a completely different person. What could Gu Yundong say? It was not that she had become a different person, but that she had always been selfish. It was just that she could not pretend anymore and was exposed. However, when she saw Chen Liang's dejected expression, she comforted him in the end. It's good to see it clearly as soon as possible so that she won't bring even greater calamity to the Qin family in the future. Uncle Qin, don't be too sad. At least you've let Niu Dan off today. Chen Liang nodded. Yes, seeing that teacher apologized to Niu Dan, I feel much better here. As he spoke, he began to hesitate, as if he had something to say and was embarrassed. Gu Yundong asked curiously, "What's wrong? Is Uncle Chen in a difficult position?" "Yes, it's like this." Uncle Chen rubbed his hands and said, "Niu Dan can't study at Wenhuo Hall in the future. I don't know where he should go in the future. Last time, you said that you knew all the schools in Feng County. Which school do you think is the best?" Uncle Chen did not listen to Gu Yundong last time. Now, he really regretted it. He was the village chief. In the past, he had thought that he was someone who had seen the world in this village. But now, compared to Gu Yundong, who had traveled everywhere and visited so many prefectures, he was just a country bumpkin. So he wanted to hear what she meant. Gu Yundong was about to talk him about this, but before she could say anything, Yunshu came in with Niu Dan and the others. When he heard this, Niu Dan immediately shouted with an intense reaction, "I'm not going to study anymore." Everyone was stunned and turned to look at him. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 765. Why don't you want to go? Uncle Chen was the first to react. He immediately scolded, "What do you mean by not studying anymore? Don't spout nonsense. You know how many children in this village don't even have the chance to study. You can only sit there and study obediently because your parents are promising. But you actually don't cherish it." He was right. How difficult was studying these days? Although he was the village chief, it was also very difficult for him to provide for his 2 grandsons to study. However, he knew the benefits of knowledge. As long as his grandson could become an elementary scholar or high scholar, it could change their life. That was why he had shamelessly come to the Gu family today and carefully asked about the school. Chen Liang even had some hidden thoughts in his heart. He had seen Qin Wenjing before. Although he did not know his exact identity, He could tell from the man's aura that he was definitely not an ordinary person, especially since Yunshu and Yuanji were both studying at his place. They had been in school for less time than Niu Dan, but they had learned more than Niu Dan. It was said that they even had to learn how to ride horses and shoot arrows. That school was much more awesome than that Wenhuo Academy. Who wouldn't want to go to such a good school? However, he had also asked around. Teacher Qin had strict requirements for accepting students. It depended on talent and fate. Actually, he also knew that the hope was slim, but Qin Wenzheng and Gu Yundong had a good relationship, so he still wanted to give it a try. Perhaps he would succeed? However, he did not expect his grandson to be unwilling to go to school. Previously, Qin Liang had fainted from anger. Now, he had almost fainted from anger because of his grandson. However, Niu Dan's face was flushed red. His small hands were clenched tightly, and he looked very agitated and resistant. Chen Liang wanted to say something, but Gu Dajiang shook his head slightly and pulled Niu Dan over. He wasn't familiar with Niu Dan, but from what his son often said, he quite liked this enthusiastic and energetic little fellow. He asked gently in a low voice, "Why don't you want to study anymore?" "It's not good to study at all. I'm unhappy and can't go home. The teacher doesn't let us play. Even if we have time to rest, we have to sit in our seats and read. We can't be in the toilet for the time of more than half a cup of tea. I feel uncomfortable. I feel like I can't breathe." Niu Dan's expression became pained as he spoke. Gu Yundong understood that Niu Dan had developed a distaste for learning. Moreover, this phenomenon had not happened for a day or two. He must have felt suffocated under the pressure of the literary master. As expected, Master Wen was not suitable to be a master. However, Qin Liang was completely stunned and did not understand. Isn't this how studying is? Which student doesn't study hard day and night? The ancients even had their heads hanging from beams and their butts sitting on thorns. They wished they could sit in front of their desks 24 hours a day. Why do you feel uncomfortable? Gu Yundong and Gu Dajiang looked at each other. This was a generation gap. Chen Liang had never studied before, so he couldn't empathize with his grandson, but Gu Dajiang knew. He gave Gu Yundong a look, and the latter left with Niu Dan, who was about to protest, and Yunshu, who was frowning as if he was thinking about something. Only Gu Dajiang and Qin Liang were left in the central room. Chen Liang was still frowning. Gu Dajiang poured him a glass of water before saying slowly, "Village chief, I can understand your hopes for the child, but we have to understand that Niu Dan is only 8 years old this year. He's still young and doesn't have enough willpower to begin with. Let alone the child, even I can't do it. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 766. Gu Dajiang's Persuasion. Qin Liang frowned even more. Gu Dajiang smiled and said, "It's like how you work hard in the fields all day for your family's food, clothes, and transportation. You work very hard and wish you could stay in the fields 24 hours a day. But is that possible? If you don't come back to rest when the weather is hot, you will suffer from heat stroke. If you work for too long, you will be tired. The hoe in your hand might even hit your toes, right? It's the same for reading. If a person doesn't rest and reads all day, his eyes won't be able to take it. His thoughts will be chaotic for a long time and he won't be able to learn at all. The appropriate rest is for better work or learning in the future. Don't you think so? If you force students to read and write, it will backfire." With this explanation, Qin Liang felt much easier to understand. He looked at Gu Dajiang and asked in a low voice, "I heard that you're studying at Tianhai Academy now. Is it the same for your academy?" Of course, the Tianhai Academy is even more relaxed. The teacher will stop after teaching a certain amount of knowledge, leaving time for you to think and interpret. If you don't understand, you can ask the teacher. If you already understand, you can read books yourself, or practice calligraphy, or draw, play chess, or even go back to the dormitory to rest in advance. At their age, the most important thing was self-awareness. Oh my God, you can do that? This was the first time Chen Liang had heard of such a teaching method. In the past, he only knew that those students stayed at home every day and did not even go out. They only knew how to read books. Their family did not dare to speak loudly at home, and they read until midnight every day. In the end, he was still too ignorant. Gu Dajiang smiled. Village chief, it's not only our Tianhai Academy. Yunshu's school is relatively relaxed. Why don't you ask him? Chen Liang was stunned. In that case, does it mean that the teacher from Wenhuo Hall doesn't know how to teach? At least in some aspects, he really didn't do well. For example, Tianhai Academy has the clothes-making vacation, Yunshu's school has it, and even the private school in the neighboring village has it for half a month. However, the Wenhuo Hall in town only let the students stay in the school to study, obliterating the students' enthusiasm for studying. How can this be? Gu Dajiang wanted to say that this guy had caused a lot of harm. Chen Liang lowered his eyes and began to think. Compared to this kind of small academy, he naturally believed in the Tianhai Academy that had nurtured so many honorable scholars and top scholars and had 100 years of history. Moreover, when he thought about it now, Niu Dan was very happy every day when he went to school at first. Every day, he would come back and talk about the interesting things in the school and how many words he had learned during the day. However, recently he had become more and more silent. When he returned home, he refused to talk about the things in the school. Chen Liang sighed. After a while, he asked, "Then, is it true that Niu Dan is not allowed to go to school? There's no need to make a decision so quickly. Niu Dan is now disgusted and repulsed by studying. He might feel that no matter which school it is, it will be the same as Wenhuo Hall. It will only give him huge pressure. If the village chief is free, you can actually bring Niu Dan to other schools to take a look and let him know that there are still many schools with different teaching methods." Chen Liang nodded thoughtfully. Gu Dajiang knew that he needed to think about it and talk to Niu Dan. The two of them stood up and walked out of the central room, planning to look for Niu Dan. Unexpectedly, after looking around the courtyard, they did not see the children. Chapter 767. Brother Shao, I want to carry your monkey. Not only were the children not around, but even Madame Yang and the others were gone. In the end, it was Father Tong who pointed them in the right direction and said that those people were watching the commotion in the Shao family. Gu Dajiang and Chen Liang looked at each other before walking towards the Shao family. As soon as they passed the door, they heard familiar and tender voices. From time to time, there were claps and cheers. The two of them looked at each other and followed the sound to the backyard of the Shao family. Then, they saw many people sitting in the backyard of the Shao family. Gu Yundong, Madame Yang, Yunshu, Yuanji, Niu Dan, the three Zheng siblings, Mao, and even Tong Shuitao and Shuirong had come to join in the fun. Standing straight in the middle of the courtyard was Shao Qingyuan. He held a bow in his hand and drew an arrow from his quiver with his right hand. Then he raised it slightly and straightened the bow. The arrow was knocked to the bowstring and aimed at a target on the other side of the courtyard. The target was a little simple, but the stake was deeply embedded in the ground, waiting there. Shao Qingyuan stretched out his arm, drew the bow, and aimed. Then he loosened his fingertips slightly. The arrow swooshed and shot towards the center bullseye. Buzz! The tail of the arrow trembled slightly and let out a joyful cry. In the next moment, cheers instantly sounded in the courtyard. Brother Shao is awesome. Brother Shao is amazing. Brother Shao is the best. Brother Shao is invincible. Brother Shao, I want to carry your monkey. Everyone was speechless. They all looked at Gu Yundong. The latter explained calmly, what I mean is that with this skill, he can definitely beat a monkey. Really? Is that what you mean? We're inexperienced. Don't lie to us. The children were still puzzled, but Mao couldn't take it anymore. He shook his shoulders eagerly and ran to Shao Qingyuan's side in a hurry. Young master, let me try too. Shao Qingyuan nodded and made way for him. Mao rubbed his palms together and even spat twice in his palm. Then he took the bow from Shao Qingyuan. Shao Qingyuan suddenly raised his head and looked at him coldly. Mao, what's wrong? Young master, don't look at me like that. I'm scared and feel like I'm going to die. He didn't say anything just now. Mao asked carefully, young master, Shao Qingyuan raised his chin and said, use that. Yundong had given it to him. He was the only one who could use it. No one else could touch it. If they did, their hand would be cut off. Mao looked in the direction Shao Qingyuan was pointing and saw an old bow and arrow. It was the one that Shao Qingyuan often used when he went hunting in the mountains. Mao was crying in his heart. He wanted to touch the new bow. It looked very sturdy and powerful. However, young master did not allow it. He could only sigh secretly and silently walk to the side to pick up the old bow. However, after seeing the bow in Shao Qingyuan's hand, the one in front of him was really too simple. He heard that this bow was made by young master himself. Mao sighed in his heart. Forget it, this bow had an extraordinary meaning. He could not despise it. Hence, he took the bow and walked back to where Shao Qingyuan had been standing. He was about to retrieve the arrow. Unexpectedly, before he could touch it, the quiver was taken away. Mao was speechless. He looked up and saw Shao Qingyuan saying expressionlessly, didn't I tell you to use that? This guy was too stupid. He needed more training. Chapter 768. Everyone in the courtyard was confused. Only Gu Yundong pursed her lips and smiled. She looked at Shao Qingyuan with a gentle gaze. Mao could only take the other quiver in a daze. He looked at the bow in his hand with grief and indignation. It was precisely because he coveted the bow in young master's hand that he was so excited to be the first to shoot. Actually, his archery skills were not very good, however. In front of everyone, he could only take a deep breath, draw his bow, and aim. Swoosh. The courtyard was as quiet as could be. Everyone stared blankly at the arrow that had missed its target and was speechless for a long time. Until Gu Yunshu suddenly slapped his forehead with his small hand, turned his head, and said, I can't bear to look. Shortly after, bursts of laughter rang out. Mao looked angrily at Go and Zhu, who had made a sound, and glared at them fiercely. On the other hand, the children were very kind. None of them laughed at him. Instead, they comforted him seriously. It's all right. Brother Mao, you were just not ready. It's not that your archery skills aren't good, Niu Dan said sincerely. Brother Mao, you're already very good. I can't even pull the bowstring. The last time Master brought us to practice riding and archery, I could only stand at the side and watch, Yunji advised. Brother Mao, although you didn't hit the target, you touched the bow and arrow. Zheng Lu thought for a long time before saying. Mao's heart skipped a beat. Please stop talking. Fortunately, Yunka did not say a word. She even came over considerately and pulled his hand. Mao was instantly warmed up. As expected, the girl was a little cotton-padded jacket. However, in the next moment, the little girl said seriously, Brother Mao, you must be standing too far away. Let's get closer. Come, take a few steps forward and try again. As the young lady spoke, she pulled his hand and walked towards the target. Well, now for sure. Mao raised his head and looked at the target a meter away from him. His heart did not waver at all. He should have guessed. To hell with the little cotton-padded jacket. Pft, haha. This time, Go and Zhu weren't the only ones laughing. Even the children couldn't help but slam the table and laugh out loud. Even Gu Yundong and Shao Qingyuan covered their mouths, their shoulders heaving and unable to stop. Gu Dajiang and Chen Liang looked up at the sky, but the corners of their lips kept curling up. Only Gu Yunka was at a loss. She ran to Gu Yundong's side and lay on his lap. She asked curiously, Elder sister, what are you laughing at? Isn't this a good idea? Yes, that's a good idea. Gu Yundong picked her up, her shoulders still trembling. The little girl saw that her elder sister was happy. Although she still did not understand why they were laughing, she also smiled foolishly. Now, there was only Mao left standing alone in front of the target. His back view was especially miserable. He swore that from today onwards, he would train hard in archery. Fortunately, Go and his brother learned from his lesson and stopped showing off. They really took a few steps forward and shortened the distance slightly. Although they didn't hit the bullseye like Shao Qingyuan, at least they didn't miss the target. In the end, they became more and more familiar, and their results gradually improved. The children also wanted to shoot arrows, but Shao Qingyuan's arrows were still too big and heavy for them. The others had never learned it before. Although Yunshu and Yuanji had taken riding and archery lessons with Qin Wenjing, it was only limited to the most basic teaching. Moreover, the bows and arrows they used were different. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 769. Father is more like a teacher. The group of people finally calmed down and stopped fooling around when they saw that the sky was getting darker. When everyone turned around, they realized that Gu Dajiang and Chen Liang had been standing in the corner for a long time. When Gu Yundong saw Chen Liang, she still said, "Uncle Chen, Niu Dan has developed a dislike of studying, so there's no hurry to go to school. We have to take it slow." "I know." Chen Liang sighed. "Your father and I talked a lot. I also know that I was too careless in the past and didn't realize that he was unhappy. I'm glad you understand." Chen Liang was very grateful to Gu Yundong and his father. When he saw that his grandson was still smiling happily, his heart ached. He held his hand and went home. The Gu family had also gone back. Shao Qingyuan wanted to follow them for a meal. Unfortunately, Gu Dajiang was back. He had to restrain himself. Gu Yundong walked to Gu Dajiang's side and whispered, "Father, what did you say to Uncle Chen?" He seemed to be thinking very seriously. "Nothing much." Gu Dajiang thought for a moment. "I just gave him an example. By the way, I think Niu Dan has a deep misunderstanding of school. It just so happens that Yunshu is on vacation at home during this period of time. Let him talk to Niu Dan." "I know." Gu Yundong nodded. "Father, I realize that you are more like a teacher than that teacher from Wenhuo Hall." As soon as she finished speaking, she was pulled into the room by Gu Yunke. On the other hand, Gu Dajiang suddenly stopped in his tracks. Teacher? Was he more like a teacher? In the following days, Yunshu indeed looked for Niu Dan to play with every day. When he was no longer so against school, Chen Liang brought him to the private school in the neighboring village. He even brought him to the county city's Dongyi Academy. However, the academy was on holiday now and there were not many students in the school. However, there were also some students and teachers who did not go home and continued to study in the academy. Originally, the academy did not allow visitors to enter, but Yunshu had been to Dongyi Academy twice and knew a few people inside. It was still easy for him to bring Niu Dan in. This way, Niu Dan finally slowly untied the knot in his heart and knew that he was narrow-minded. He began to slowly like the atmosphere of the school again, especially Dongyi Academy. He felt that he would be very happy to study here. The Chen family heaved a sigh of relief and began to prepare to bring Niu Dan to Dongyi Academy to attend school after the clothes leave. At the same time, Yunshu didn't forget that Kiki's birthday was coming up. He entered the kitchen even more frequently. Gu Yundong thought that since she had given Yunshu a surprise last time, she would change her method this time. Hence, she hugged the little girl and asked her directly, "Kiki, it's almost your birthday. Have you thought of what you want? Tell me, it'll satisfy you." The little girl was stunned and her eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yes, what do you want to eat and play?" The little girl hugged her neck, then looked up at the sky and said, "I want to become a fairy and run to the moon. I heard that there's Goddess Change on the moon. She has a little rabbit. I want to try Goddess Change's mooncake and see if it's delicious. I can bring it down for you to eat." Gu Yundong was speechless. She said with difficulty, "Anything else? This is too difficult." The little girl was a little disappointed, but after thinking about it, it made sense. She heard that to become a fairy, one had to go through many hardships. She was still too young, so the hardships were definitely not enough. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 770, Birthday Wish. However, in the next moment, the little girl's eyes lit up again and she said, I got it. Tell me, I want to grow up tomorrow. This way, I can make so many delicious foods that you can taste and praise me for. As she spoke, her face began to fill with yearning. The young lattice goal was already very clear. She liked to eat and cook. In the future, she would become as powerful as her sister and make many different things that she had never seen before to let everyone know how powerful she was. The little girl was thinking happily, but when she looked up, she realized that her eldest sister had a constipated expression. Even her parents and brothers, who were also listening attentively, were secretly covering their mouths and laughing. The young lady was instantly angry. She sat in Gu Yundong's arms and put her hands on her fat waist. Don't laugh. I can make it. I can make delicious food and slap your faces. Gu Dajiang was overjoyed as he carried her over. All right. We won't laugh. Kiki will definitely make the best food in the future. But Kiki, if you want to become an adult tomorrow, we can't do anything about it. Think of other wishes that we can help you fulfill, okay? Gu Dajiang was happy. In the past, when he was in the Gu family, be it Gu Yundong or Gu Yunshu, they were exceptionally sensible at a young age. Such naive words would never come out of their mouths. Even if they wanted to eat corn and sweet potatoes, they would only secretly think about it in their hearts. They watched eagerly and did not dare to bring it up. However, now that she had developed such a personality, it meant that his family's life was really good. They no longer had to be careful at such a young age and say whatever they wanted. Gu Dajiang felt bitter and complicated as he looked at his eldest daughter, who had changed everything. However, Gu Yundong had a conflicted expression. She was too naive. A child's dream could not be on the same level as an adult's. She should not have been too confident. After thinking for a while, she could only say to the little girl, why don't you tell me something I can do? You can tell me 3 wishes, 3. The little girl began to rack her brains. Something that big sister can do? But in her heart, big sister could do anything. Yunshu squatted beside Gu Dajiang and held her small hand as she said, for example, you can eat a few more candies during your birthday. For example, if you want big sister to sing for you. Before he could finish speaking, he was hit on the head. He turned his head and looked at Gu Yundong sadly. The latter glared at him. Sing Myas. You're the one who wants to hear it, aren't you? Yung also suggested, Kiki, you can also get a new set of clothes. Gu Dajiang also said, or we can have a big meal. Madame Yang nodded crazily. This is good. Kiki, have a big meal. You like it? The little girl twisted her little head and turned around on everyone's face, as if she was thinking. After a long time, he finally nodded solemnly. I got it. Everyone looked at her expectantly. Firstly, I want to eat cake. As she spoke, she could not help but swallow her saliva. She had eaten it on second brother's birthday last time. It was delicious. After that, big sister stopped making it. She said that it was not easy to make and she did not have time. All right. Gu Yundong agreed and heaved a sigh of relief. At least she was not going to the sky or down the ground. When the time comes, not only will there be cake, but I will also make something else for you like your second brother. The little girl nodded vigorously. I also want to invite my friends. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 771. Family Shopping. Gu Yundong rubbed her head and nodded. What about the second one? The second one. The little girl's round eyes looked around, and everyone looked puzzled. Soon she said, I want to visit the county city. Our family together. Gu Yundong was stunned. The family visiting the county? She looked at the young lattice's expectant expression. Speaking of which, Kiki really didn't go shopping often. At most, she would sit in the carriage and lift the curtain to look outside. This was something that only happened when Gu Yundong was at home. If she was not at home, no one would dare to take her out on the streets. However, every time, she would look at the bustling streets outside in surprise. She might have gone on the streets twice after going to the prefectural city, but she had never been with her family. Gu Yundong immediately agreed. All right, what about the third one? This time, the little girl was silent for a long time. She frowned and thought hard. She felt like smoke was coming out of her head, but she did not come up with anything. Finally, she shook her head. I haven't decided. All right, we'll talk about it after Kiki has thought it through. The little girl nodded vigorously and began to look forward to her birthday. When that day came, Gu Yundong indeed started preparing food early in the morning. Many children in the village came, and everyone had a happy day. The next day, Gu Yundong brought her entire family out to shop. The carriage stopped in the backyard of Gus and the family walked to other places. Compared to the prefectural city, Fengkai County was much smaller. However, if they really wanted to shop, they wouldn't be able to finish shopping for an entire day. Gu Yundong thought that Kiki liked to eat, so she brought her to the street that specialized in food. Along the way, they bought a lot of pastries and snacks, and all kinds of buns and pancakes filled her bag. After walking for half a circle, Gu Yundong felt that this wish was not easy to fulfill at all. It was too tiring. When she finally saw a Jinxiu restaurant in front, she quickly suggested, "It's getting late. Let's go to the restaurant for lunch." Okay. Other than Kiki and Madame Yang, all the three men nodded impatiently. Kiki found it strange. Why did they have to go to the restaurant to eat? They had clearly eaten a lot along the way. Could it be that they were hungry so quickly? She was not hungry at all. She was so good. Madame Yang didn't feel hungry either. She was in a good mood and was carrying a pot of flowers. However, since the others had agreed, they would let them be. The group of people walked into Jinxiu restaurant and asked for a private room from the shopkeeper. Then, they went in and slumped on the chair, not wanting to move. Gu Yundong ordered a few dishes and let everyone eat slowly. Anyway, she knew that they could not eat much now. The most important thing was to rest. Perhaps it was because she had drunk too much water, but not long after, Kiki whispered into her ear that she wanted to go to the toilet. Gu Yundong brought her out. The outhouse was in the backyard. The two of them slowly went downstairs. It was almost time to eat, and the waiter began to get busy. After a while, when they returned, more than half of the people in the hall were already seated. Gu Yundong carried Kiki upstairs. Just as she was about to enter the private room, she saw someone walking towards another private room with a dark expression. This person glanced in her direction. Perhaps because she was carrying Kiki in her arms and blocking most of her face, he didn't recognize her. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 772. A different room, but Gu Yundong recognized him. Tao Xing, the second young master of the Tao family, the wastrel who had lost many shops to Lu Wei. He was not the only one who came. There were two other people walking behind him. One was a young man, and the other was a middle-aged man. The three of them entered the private room together, but Tao Xing's expression was very ugly. Gu Yundong paused. In the past, she would not have looked at Tao Xing. After all, the man had nothing to do with her. Although Tao Xing had suffered at her hands, the Tao family did not cause trouble for her. However, when she thought of how Shao Qingyuan's background was related to the Tao family, she couldn't help but pay more attention to the Tao family. Big sister? The young lady in her arms looked at Gu Yundong, who was standing at the door and hesitating to enter. She tilted her head. Gu Yundong came back to her senses and smiled at the young lady. Then, he pushed open the door of the private room and carried her in. He said to Gu Dajiang, "Father, I'll go out for a while. You guys rest first." Gu Dajiang nodded and didn't ask further. He knew that his daughter was busy. Gu Yundong went out again and looked at the private room that Tao Xing had entered. This was the Jinxiu restaurant. Due to her relationship with the Liu family, she was very familiar with this restaurant. Tao Xing's private room. She remembered that when Lu Wei brought her to the restaurant earlier, he had mentioned that this restaurant originally did not belong to the Liu family. It was bought by the Liu family from other merchants. The original owner did not know how to do business. This restaurant kept incurring losses and could not be saved at all. Later, when the Liu family took over, it was not ideal at first. Some people said that the Liu family would probably follow in their footsteps. In the end, old Master Liu secretly found a feng shui master to help him calculate. The master said that there was a problem with the feng shui. The big private room at the corner was leaking money. It was best to split it into two, but it could not be completely separated. Hence, old Master Liu divided that private room into two rooms. According to the feng shui master, the wooden planks separating the rooms were very thin. Therefore, although these two private rooms looked like two, in fact, they could hear each other's words clearly. Other than the few people from the Liu family and the manager of the restaurant, no one else knew about this. However, old Master Liu was a strict businessman. The two private rooms had always been used as one private room. As long as one private room had a guest, the other private room would not receive guests. As for why Lu Wei told her, it was because there was a time when she wanted to sit in that corner private room, but Lu Wei didn't let her. He had a strange expression on his face. One moment he said that there were guests in that private room, and the next moment he said that there weren't. He contradicted himself and gave himself away, and then she tricked him. Coincidentally, Tao Xing entered the room today. Gu Yundong smiled and walked to the door of the private room. She looked around and did not see the waiter and shopkeeper. He quietly pushed the door open and walked in. Then he locked the door from the inside. Then she tiptoed to the wooden wall separating the private room and pressed her ear against it. In the end, there was still a layer between them. The voice on the other end was a little blurry. After a while, Tao Xing and the other two seemed to hear the waiter bringing the dishes over. Except for the waiter reporting the dishes, they didn't say anything. It was not until the waiter finished serving the dishes and left after saying, "Please enjoy your meal, sir." When the door of the private room was closed, one of the voices could be heard. "Second young master, don't be too angry. There's always a solution." The voice sounded a little low. It should be the middle-aged man speaking. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 773, Shocking News Then, Tao Xing said angrily, "How can I not be angry? My brother is deliberately trying to kill me. He dug out all my secrets and placed them in front of my father and grandmother. I really want to kill him." The middle-aged man comforted him. No matter how much eldest young master does, it's useless. In old master and old madam's hearts, second young master is still more important. That's right. Eldest young master made so many preparations this time. The evidence was right in front of old master and old madam. Didn't old master just reprimand you a little? Eldest young master did nothing. The young man also said, Tao Feng, the eldest young master of the Tao family, was completely disregarded in his words. There was only disdain. But Tao Xing slammed the table, scaring Gu Yundong so much that she almost knocked her head on the wooden wall. Reprimand? My father took back all the things I'm doing. I don't have any power now. How can this be called useless? Second young master, there's no need to be anxious. Old master is just doing it for eldest young master to see. In at most 3 months, second young master will be able to regain control. The middle-aged man said. Tao Xing sneered. 3 months is long enough. When I take over, who knows what my brother will do. I really regret not finding more people to snatch those jars of wine. Gu Yundong's expression changed. Snatch? Were those men in black sent by Tao Xing? Was the man they met in Anbei town colluding with Tao Xing? Damn it. It turned out that not only did this scourge want to rob them, but he also wanted to kill them. Gu Yundong tugged her fingers slightly and suppressed her anger. She continued to listen. The middle-aged man's voice continued. Eldest young master is scheming. It's useless even if we find a few more people. Who would have thought that the escort was just a bait and there were no wine jars in the carriage at all? I wonder who eldest young master found to transport those jars of wine and the things under the jars. Was there something under the wine jars back then? Gu Yundong frowned. Back then, they had indeed opened the wine jar, but the color of the wine in the jar was a little dark. She did not know if there was anything under it, so she was really not sure. It seemed like he had used the escort agency to secretly transport something that was worth more than the 4 jars of wine. Tao Xing snorted coldly. No matter how scheming he is, he wouldn't have guessed that my father had placed something in the wine jars. Why would he specially change the team just for those 4 jars of wine? I think those people didn't put in enough effort. They ran away because they couldn't beat a few escorts and even found an excuse. I shouldn't have hired them back then. I could have found a few robbers who were better than them. At this point, it's useless to say all this. The eldest young master has completed that task. The 4 jars of wine have been sent to the Qingyuan Prefecture. If we want to frame the eldest young master, we have to find another way. Tao Xing was very frustrated. What other way can I find? I have nothing to do now. I don't have the power to do anything. You can't say that. The young man suddenly laughed and said mysteriously, "Second young master, I've recently heard of something. It's just nice that you can take advantage of the fact that you have nothing to do in the next 3 months to investigate properly. Perhaps you can completely overthrow eldest young master and make him have no chance to make a comeback." Tao Xing and the middle-aged man looked at each other with interest. What is it? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 774. Tao Feng is looking for Shao Qingyuan reading Omicron and Novel Cool. Omicron, Lise, I heard that eldest young master is looking for third young master. Tao Xing and the middle-aged man were surprised. Even Gu Yundong was shocked. Tao Feng was looking for third young master, or Shao Qingyuan? That's impossible. Tao Xing was the first to deny it. He has the guts to look for that jinx? No one in the entire Tao family dares to mention this. If he finds the guy, grandmother will chase him out of the family without us. Therefore, eldest young master's actions were very secretive, the young man said with a smile. Actually, eldest young master hasn't started looking for him recently. He already started searching for him half a year ago, but the commotion was too small, so no one knew about it. That's why I heard about it recently. Tao Xing was excited when he heard that. Alright, I haven't done anything, but he's already courting death. Just let him go and look for him. They'll see what he can do when he finds him. Gu Yundong did not look good. Tao Feng was looking for Shao Qingyuan. Tao Xing would definitely keep an eye on him. By then, the Tao family would know. Shao Qingyuan's troubles would follow. At that moment, Gu Yundong really wanted to rush over and beat Tao Xing to death. After that, Tao Xing and the others talked about something. Gu Yundong started to listen intermittently. It seemed that they had found Tao Feng's weakness. Tao Xing's mood finally improved, and he no longer cared about his power. She slowly sat on the stool and continued to listen to the conversation in the private room while thinking about why Tao Feng was looking for Shao Qingyuan. Tao Feng should have known about this younger brother long ago. Then what was his attitude towards this younger brother? Was it because they were from the same mother, and as the eldest brother, he wanted to regain the kinship and responsibility for his younger brother? Or was it that he, like the rest of the Tao family, also felt that his third brother was a jinx who caused his mother to die and his status in the Tao family to not be high? Or maybe he was fighting alone and needed an ally? Gu Yundong thought for a long time, but she could not tell what Tao Feng was thinking. The only thing she was sure of was that it would be troublesome. If he started looking for Shao Qingyuan, it would definitely be very troublesome. Gu Yundong pursed her lips. She had to discuss this with Shao Qingyuan as soon as possible. Not long after Tao Xing and the other two finished eating, they left. Gu Yundong then got up, rubbed her stiff limbs, and walked out of the private room. The waiter from Jinxiu restaurant happened to go upstairs to clean up the plates. When he saw her coming out from next door, his expression changed. Why was Lady Gu here? The waiter did not dare to ask and hurriedly explained the situation to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper knew that Miss Gu had a good relationship with his young master and also knew about the grudge between her and the Tao family. After hearing this, he more or less guessed something. He asked the waiter to keep it quiet and only found an opportunity to tell Old Master Liu. When Old Master Liu heard this, he knew that the Gu girl must have known about the problem with the private room. He did not say anything and pretended that he did not know. He asked the shopkeeper and the waiter to shut up and pretend not to see it. Meanwhile, Gu Yundong had already returned to her private room. The Gu family had been waiting for a long time. Kiki even sat in Gu Dajiang's arms and nodded her head as if she was about to fall asleep. Gu Dajiang said, "We've been shopping for half a day. I think everyone is tired. It's not early either. Let's go home first." The girl in his arms nodded. Let's go home. After all, she was still young. Although she was still in high spirits previously, after eating and drinking her fill and resting in such a quiet place for so long, she immediately felt tired. Chapter 775. What do you think? Reading Omicron and Novel Cool. Omicron, Li Gu Yundong nodded. All right, let's go home. The group left the private room and quickly returned to Yongfu village in a carriage. She was a little distracted along the way. Gu Dajiang could tell that she must have encountered something when she went out. He wanted to ask, but the carriage was filled with children. He had to wait until they reached home. When they arrived at the Gu residence, Gu Dajiang carried the sleeping girl down. Yunshu and Yuanji, who were also taking an afternoon nap in the carriage, couldn't help but rub their eyes when they heard the sound. They woke up and went down in a daze. Without waiting for the carriage to be pulled in, Gu Yundong hurriedly said, "I have something to discuss with Brother Shao." Gu Dajiang, who was about to ask, was speechless. All right, it seemed that her absent-mindedness had something to do with Shao Qingyuan. When Gu Yundong entered the Shao residence, she realized that Shao Qingyuan was not at home. After asking Mao, he found out that Shao Qingyuan had heard that a doctor with good medical skills and morals had been chased out of a medical center. He was busy looking for that doctor. When the time came to open a pharmacy, he would be hire the doctor. The pharmacy Shao Qingyuan bought in the Prefectural city was relatively large and had a good location. He originally wanted to rent it out and open the pharmacy in a year or two. However, Gu Yundong's footsteps were too fast, so he could not slack off. Coupled with the appearance of a suitable doctor, he had already collected a lot of herbs. He could prepare the pharmacy in the prefecture capital. Gu Yundong frowned slightly and wanted to look for him. However, even Mao did not know where the doctor's house was, so she could only wait at the Shao family's house. She waited until night fell. When Shao Qingyuan entered, his face was filled with joy. It was obvious that things had gone smoothly. Unexpectedly, Mao told him that Gu Yundong had been waiting for him all afternoon. Shao Qingyuan immediately quickened his pace and hurried through the door. "Yundong, what's wrong? Did something happen?" Gu Yundong hurriedly went out to welcome him. She nodded when she heard this, and a rare serious expression appeared on her face. Shao Qingyuan pulled her back to her seat. "Come, sit down and talk slowly. Did you encounter some trouble?" "I'm not the one in trouble. You are." Shao Qingyuan was stunned for a moment before he heaved a sigh of relief. Then he smiled and said, "It's fine. If there's trouble, let's resolve it. There's nothing to be afraid of." Gu Yundong glared at him. "Don't take it lightly. The trouble I'm talking about is about the Tao family." There was no one in the central room, but Mao and the others were in the courtyard. Gu Yundong still pulled him into the room and told him what she had overheard when she met Tao Xing today. Shao Qingyuan couldn't help but frown. "What do you think?" Gu Yundong asked. Shao Qingyuan thought for a moment and said, "Since Tao Xing colluded with that robber, it seems that he knows that robber. Last time, Dai especially went to keep an eye on that person. There should be a result. He might know who that robber is. Moreover, that robber can make Dai Wenhuo rush back in advance. I'm afraid there's something wrong with his identity. Coincidentally, since Tao Xing knows him, he might be able to start with Tao Xing. I think we can just tell Qin Wenjing about this." He definitely knows what to do. We don't have to care about anything else. Yundong was speechless. She was furious. Who's talking to you about the robbers? Did this person hear the main point? She pinched him angrily. I'm talking about Feng looking for you. Chapter 776, 2 Inhumane reading Omicron and Novel Cool. Omicron, Liu Xiahui was looking for Shao Qingyuan. This was what she wanted to say. Shao Qingyuan was stunned for a moment before he smiled and said, "Just let them keep looking. It's fine." "How can it be fine? What if they find you?" "So what if they find me? Can the Tao family take my life? Their goal is to suppress me and not let me stand out. Only then can they ensure that the Tao family will be rich for a long time. But now that I'm already grown, who else can they find to suppress me? Besides, didn't you just say that Tao Xing is colluding with that robber? If Qingyuan finds out, he definitely won't let them off. What am I afraid of?" Yundong saw that he really did not care about the Tao family and did not care if they would come looking for him. Indeed, according to the Tao family's intentions, they wouldn't take Shao Qingyuan's life, but Yundong glared at him. "Why don't you understand? If Feng finds you, everyone will know that you're a member of the Tao family. Tao Xing colluded with the robbers and might have done something treasonous. If the entire Tao family is involved, you won't be able to escape if the Tao family is convicted." These days were different from the modern world. There was no such thing as taking responsibility for one's own actions. If one person committed a crime, the entire family would be implicated. If Shao Qingyuan had nothing to do with the Tao family, she would have directly reported the matter to Qingyuan in the county city. Why would she care about the Tao family's life? But not now. If something happened to the Tao family, Shao Qingyuan might be implicated. Especially when Feng was still looking for him, who knew how many clues he had? Yundong lowered her head and frowned. After a while, she said, "No, we can't tell Qingyuan about Tao Xing's relationship with the robber for the time being. At the very least, I have to ensure your safety first. But what should I do?" Yundong began to ponder. Her expression was exceptionally solemn. If someone in a family commits a crime, others in the family will suffer too. This law is too inhumane. Now, we don't know how far Tao Xing has crossed the line. Will he suffer alone or will everyone die with him? We can only prepare for the worst and think of a way to get you out of this. She rubbed her chin and looked out of the window. A moment later, she frowned again. "Unless you make a great contribution and can make the emperor exempt you." Great contribution? Great contribution? If I had known earlier, I would have reported this method of refining white sugar in your name. This kind of contribution to improving the livelihood of the people, coupled with your incompatible relationship with the Tao family, and the fact that the emperor is a reasonable person, he definitely won't punish you. However, she could not do it now. She had already reported it to the emperor. If she changed it now, it would be a crime of deceiving the emperor. Not only would it not help Shao Qingyuan, it might even add fuel to the fire. What else could she do? What did the emperor care about the most? People's livelihood, military affairs, culture. On the military side, she could create explosives. Explosives were no longer restricted in the apocalypse. There were so many zombies, and there were not enough guns and bullets. Many people would create explosives themselves to save their lives. At that time, whoever mastered one more ability would be able to live for a few more days. Yundong did not know how to do it at first, but when she went out with a small team one time to search for supplies, she had seen someone do it. Its power was average and did not have the aura of sweeping through 1,000 troops that she had imagined, but it was not a problem to blow up a couple of zombies. Chapter 777. Yundong and Qingyuan are in the room reading Omicron and Novel Cool. Omicron, Yundong tried to make it once. There were several packets of it in her space. But no, this thing was too powerful. In the era of cold weapons, the hot weapon would be convenient for the militants. If this thing was taken out, the impact would be earth-shattering. She could not do it. Moreover, with their current situation, they might even have problems protecting themselves. Gu Yundong dismissed this idea in her mind. If the military could not be touched, then there was only livelihood and culture. This range was huge. She had to think about it carefully. What should she do? Gu Yundong's brows were tightly knitted, and his mind was almost in a knot. Suddenly, a heat source came from behind, and then her entire body was pulled into Shao Qingyuan's arms. Shao Qingyuan hugged her tightly. It was as if she was his entire life. There was a smile on his face, and his heart ached. He was surrounded by an unprecedented sense of satisfaction. He couldn't help but lower his voice. There's no need to think so much. Gu Yundong turned her head slightly. How can I not think so much? I don't even know what Tao Feng found. Gu Yundong's eyes widened when her mouth was suddenly blocked. Did he kiss her? Shao Qingyuan left as soon as he kissed her. His lips still had her soft touch, making him feel a little reluctant. Seeing her stunned expression, Shao Qingyuan's eyes darkened. He quickly shifted his gaze and looked out of the window, but he still hugged her tightly. Just tell Qin Wenjing the entire matter. We don't know how serious the Tao family's crime is, but Qin Wenjing definitely knows. Once he knows, he will know what to do. Shao Qingyuan felt that directly handing over the troublesome matter to Qin Wenjing was the best solution. Besides, they could be considered to have contributed by reporting Tao Xing, right? Back then, they had brought Dai Wenhuo into the mountains and exposed the robbers' true colors. They had already contributed. Gu Yundong finally came back to her senses. She subconsciously pursed her lips and wondered why he left after kissing her. She had yet to react. However, after hearing Shao Qingyuan's words, she was still stunned for a moment. She asked him in surprise, "Are you planning to tell him your background?" "There's nothing to hide. I don't care anymore." In the past, he had kept it a secret because he was afraid that Gu Yundong would also treat him as a jinx and avoid him. But now it didn't matter. As long as she stood by his side, the opinions of others didn't matter. Gu Yundong was stunned for a long time before saying in a low voice, "Then, shall we look for Qin Wenjing tomorrow?" "Yes, let's go together." Shao Qingyuan tightened his arms slightly and said in a low voice, "Don't think too much. Someone will take care of it for us." He was not embarrassed to trouble Qin Wenjing at all. After all, the man was a young top scholar and a genius. There was no problem. Gu Yundong inexplicably sympathized with Qin Wenjing. She smiled and placed her hand on his arm around her waist, gently twisting it. Shao Qingyuan's body stiffened slightly, and he couldn't help but lower his head again. At this moment, Gu Dajiang's voice came from outside the door. "Yundong, Yundong, are you here?" The two people who were hugging each other suddenly separated. Gu Yundong subconsciously started to tidy up her clothes and hairstyle. By the time she saw that there was nothing unusual, Gu Dajiang was already standing outside the door. His voice was filled with anger as he asked Mao, "You said that the two of them are in the room?" Killing was quick and painless, but these two people wanted a servant to torture their descendant until his body and mind were damaged. Living was more miserable than death. Just because of what a fortune teller said? Qin Wenjing was furious when he heard this. Although Shao Qingyuan had described his experiences since he was young casually, he knew that it would not be easy. He frowned tightly and thought for a moment before saying, "I understand. I'll consider this matter carefully." Gu Yundong asked him, "Since Tao Xing is colluding with that robber, can we arrest him now before they find out Brother Shao's identity?" Qin Wenjing couldn't help but glare at her. "What lousy idea did you come up with? If we arrest Tao Xing now, we'll alert the enemy. We can only investigate how deeply Tao Xing and the robber are related first. Is it just hiring someone with money, or are they very close? However, if you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., Please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 780, Gu Yundong looks at him like he was a fool to enjoy reading. A glint flashed across Qin Wenzheng's eyes, as if he was about to come up with a bad idea. Gu Yundong's interest was piqued. But what? You can cause some trouble for the Tao family, Qin Wenjing said with a smile. Find more things for the Tao family, especially Tao Feng. Divert his attention and make him lose the energy to search for the third young master of the Tao family. Then, Shao Qingyuan's identity won't be exposed. It would also buy him time to secretly investigate the Tao family. We'll tell you how to deal with the Tao family after we've investigated. If Tao Xing's matter is too big and you can't escape, then think of a way to make a contribution. If you're not involved, your identity won't be able to harm you even if it's exposed. However, according to Qin Wenzheng's thoughts, Shao Qingyuan had provided clues time and time again, and he had already included him in the credit book. It did not matter much. Shao Qingyuan knew what was going on. What trouble are you referring to? Ah. Qin Wenjing laughed. That's your problem. In any case, both of you are quite smart. I believe it won't be difficult for you to come up with an idea to trip the Tao family up. He looked like he was just going to provide an idea and leave the rest to them. Gu Yundong snorted and looked at him as if she was looking at a fool. Don't think that she couldn't tell what Qin Wenjing was up to. He was thinking that when they helped him, they would also help him divert their attention so that it would be easier for him to investigate, right? She couldn't bear to see him so smug. Gu Yundong raised her eyebrows and said, Isn't it just to make Tao Feng unable to investigate the whereabouts of the third young master of the Tao family? It's not difficult. Oh, you already have an idea? Qin Wenjing immediately looked at her with sparkling eyes. Gu Yundong was indeed Gu Yundong. She was quick-witted. It's simple. We can just let Tao Feng know that Tao Xing has his eyes on him. No matter what Tao Feng's motive is, he definitely doesn't want others to know that he's keeping such a low profile, especially Tao Xing. Qin Wenjing was speechless. In that case, it made sense. He was still struggling. Then how do you plan to let Tao Feng know? You can't run to him personally and tell him that your secret has been exposed, right? Gu Yundong shook her head. They'll hire someone to follow Tao Feng for a couple of days and let him know that he's being followed. Tao Feng must be pondering who's following him. The first suspect will be Tao Xing, and Tao Xing is very confident of finding out Tao Feng's mistakes, so he's definitely not hasty. Chapter 781. Chaos to enjoy reading. Shao Qingyuan chuckled and held her hand. Let's go back. Gu Yundong was a woman of her word. For the next 2 days, she had Mao dress up and secretly guard the Tao family's door. When Mao saw Tao Feng come out, he would quickly follow him. Gu Yundong had deliberately disguised Mao as the middle-aged man he had seen at Jinxiu restaurant that day. He had a beard, thick eyebrows, and wore a clean long robe. Upon closer inspection, Mao's original appearance could not be seen. Since the middle-aged man was with Tao Xing, Tao Feng might know him too. This made him even more certain that Tao Xing was watching him in the dark. Mao used to be a beggar, so he was very familiar with tracking people. Not only that, but 2 days later he found another 2 people secretly following Tao Feng. They must be Tao Xing's men. However, the whereabouts of these 2 people were very secretive. If Mao didn't have a good memory and saw them 3 times in 2 days, he probably wouldn't have discovered them. Mao's whereabouts were exposed very quickly. When Tao Feng discovered him, he wanted to catch him. Unfortunately, Mao was agile and crawled around in the alley. Not long after, he entered the backyard of a restaurant and came out after changing his clothes. Tao Feng's servant returned empty-handed, but he described his appearance to Tao Feng. Tao Feng had indeed seen that middle-aged man before. He was angry, but he became much more cautious after that. Then, Gu Yundong asked Mao to leave. She couldn't possibly go too far. A few days later, they heard that the Tao family's eldest young master and second young master suddenly fought one day and smashed more than 10 jars of wine that the Tao family had stored in the warehouse. Old Lady Tao was so angry that she fainted. She scolded the two of them and lay on the bed, unable to get up. Master Tao was so angry that he beat up his two sons. Mrs. Tao looked at Tao Xing's bruised face and begged for mercy in front of Master Tao. At night, she kept whispering to him. Old Master Tao was biased towards Tao Xing to begin with. He was especially dissatisfied with Tao Feng and scolded him for not knowing how to take care of his younger brother as the eldest brother. He wanted to take back the power in Tao Feng's hands. Unfortunately, after the investigation, he found out that Tao Xing was the one who provoked him first. Even if he took back the power in Tao Feng's hands, he could not hand it over to Tao Xing. He could not handle it alone. Furthermore, Tao Feng had not been living in the Tao family for nothing all these years. Old Master Tao had two favored concubines who had long been bribed by Tao Feng. In addition, they had the same interests and enemies. They were also whispering to Old Master Tao. Yunji looked at the city wall in front of him and weighed it slightly. He thought to himself that he didn't need 100 yunches to reach its height. After entering the city gate, although it was already a little late, compared to the county city, the prefectural city was still very lively. Yunshu and Yunji stuck their necks out and squeezed by the window. They were dazzled. "Sister, where is our shop?" "It's still a few streets away," Gu Yundong said. Kiki had also woken up, and she rubbed her eyes and squeezed over. The three little heads almost squeezed each other into a meat patty. She wanted to laugh. The carriage finally arrived an hour later. As Shui Rong was the first to ride back and give instructions, when Gu Yundong and his family arrived home, the food was already hot. Yunshu and Yuanji bounced around in the courtyard. "Eldest sister, is this our home?" "Cousin, where's the milk tea shop? Shall we go tomorrow?" "Yes, I'll bring you to the shop tomorrow." Just as Gu Yundong agreed, Lu Xing whispered, "Miss, I'm afraid it's not appropriate to go on the streets tomorrow. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know reports so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.